evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another round of the NXTGEN Racing PROTO GT3 Championship for 2022, as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform known only as iRacing, available on PC. And as you heard from the intro theme there, today is indeed Daytona Day. That's right, it is round number 4 in the 12-round calendar, and we're at none other than the Daytona International Speedway, located in Florida in the United States of America, for what is the first of our 3 Super Endurance rounds on the calendar. And that means tonight our schedule is going to be a bit more simple than our normal schedule, in the fact, as you can see there, times in British Summer Time, that's BST or UTC +1. We have one and only event tonight, and that is the feature race, the 2-hour endurance race, or the Super Endurance race, that will be kicking off in just under 14 minutes time. So at 8 o'clock this evening, and it will be all in on the strategy and pace for our drivers to determine who is going to be our winner within their respective class at Daytona. Now, of course, we're taking a look back tonight at what is Lobby 2, the lobby sponsored by IMB Racewear. The official race occurred earlier this week. It occurred on Wednesday, so we are taking a look back at a replay file. This race itself is not live, but we're bringing you all the commentary and experience as if it were live. And I can say, as your commentator and host, it is the case that I do not know the result, and therefore it's going to be completely new to me how things play out. And indeed, to many of you, it will be the same as well. Now, tonight's broadcast is being brought to you on one of 3 media platforms for your viewing pleasure. Firstly, if you are on YouTube, you can tune in via the official NXTGEN Racing YouTube channel. Secondly, if you are a Facebook user, you can tune in via facebook.com/groups/NXTGEN Racing. Or last but not least, if you are Twitch inclined, you can tune in via twitch.tv/TX1for1. And who is TX1for1? Well, that's me, your host and commentator. My name is Paul Walsh, also known by the pseudonym of TX1for1 or Britain a Spit on the internet, and it's the case that I'm bringing you all of your racing action throughout the entirety of this season across both of the lobbies in this series. Now, of course, with this being Lobby 2 as sponsored by IMB Racewear, it is the case that we should only be courteous and introduce our title sponsor for this lobby. So who are IMB Racewear, I hear you ask, and what do they stand for? Well, IMB Racewear, in short, is essentially the company which delivers racewear for both sim and real-life racers, enabling the racer to make the impact they always wanted. What sets IMB Racewear apart from the competition, however, is that their racewear provides itself an individuality, as it is designed for you by you, meaning that each product is fully customizable, unlike your typical off-the-shelf racewear products. Whether you're looking for racing gloves, racing shoes or team clothing, there are no limits to levels of customization available. And if you want to know more and get your hands on your own bespoke racewear today, be sure to head to imbRacewear.com tonight in order to find out more and potentially get your hands on your own bespoke racewear. And indeed, whether you are a sim racer, alternatively a real world racer, fantastic racewear as offered by IMB Racewear, and the prices, I can tell you, are fantastic. And I may myself be invested in a set of sim racing gloves in the near future, perhaps even a pair of shoes. And in terms of IMB Racewear's contribution, our title sponsor, they are supporting the prize pool for Lobby 2, in particular for our GT3 classes, whereby there'll be a set of custom gloves up for grabs for our GT3 class winners come the end of the season, and that is added to the cash prize pool, which will be available to our drivers in the GT3 class, whereas our LMP2 AM class drivers in this lobby, they will only have the cash prize pool. The exact values are to be determined. But after introducing IMB Racewear, it's only fair that we come to our calendar, and well, let's take you through that calendar as it stands. Indeed, we are now a third of the way into the season as of tonight. By the time we bring the checkered flag and the curtain down, we've completed the first third, and you can see it there. The date there on the calendar, the 27th of April, Daytona Road Course, our 4th round. We started off, of course, at Watkins Glen on the 6th of April. Then we headed to Road Atlanta, continuing the theme of the tour of the North American continent. And then we went to Canada briefly for the Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, known as Mosport in short. That was last week on the 20th of April, a race which was all about attrition, particularly in the feature race, and today we are at Daytona. After today, it will be the case that we've taken a 1-week break before returning on what will be effectively for the show, the 13th of May, but our drivers will be back out the circuit on the 11th of May for the commencement of the series' mainstream tour of the European continent, and that will kick off in Austria with the Red Bull Ring on the 11th of May. Now, then be the case that our drivers will be heading to Germany the week after for Hockenheim, before heading to Monza in Italy on the 25th of May, and then we'll have our second Super Endurance round at Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium the venerable Belgian circuit, renowned across series, and that will be taking place, the actual race, on the 1st of June. Now, it'll be the second of our 3 Super Endurance races before we take another 1-week break, and then we briefly head to Great Britain for Silverstone for the commencement of the final third of the series on the 15th of June. Then we're going to make a brief jump over to the Pacific continent, in particular, the Asia Pacific continent, and that in particular will be Suzuka, I should say, on the 22nd of June, before returning to Central Europe for the Nürburgring on the 29th of June, and then we bring it all to a close with our final round at the Circuit de la Sarthe, or Le Mans in short, for our final Super Endurance round on the 6th of July, where it's an absolutely packed calendar there, and you can imagine, with that in mind, all of our drivers will be looking to do their utmost in order to be able to get the maximum possible points over the entirety of this series. It is not the case that there's going to be any particular round where there's extra points up for grabs. All the rounds are weighted equally on points, and therefore our drivers will want to get the utmost of every single round. If they need to drop a round or not be present for a round, they'll need to pick it wisely. And speaking of our drivers, we need to come onto our classes, and we can see that started off with our LMP2 AM class. It is the case that after the opening 3 rounds, Stephan Wessels is our leader by 10 points there, leading ahead of Michael Price, and then Sam Holman in P3 only a further 3 points behind. It was the case last time out at the Canadian circuit of Mosport that Stephan Wessels put in an absolutely brilliant performance and almost picked up a perfect score, albeit missing out on the win in the sprint race, losing that to Michael Price after a mistake early on in the race. Michael Price put in another great performance, but it really is the story now of whether Stephan Wessels can break away as of tonight. Now, he does have Michael Price there in hot pursuit, along with Sam Holman. Both drivers there have Price and Holman putting in great performances throughout the season, and really showing that whilst they may not be the fastest in class, they are very consistent, particularly Sam Holman last time out. Paul Williams in P4 there, having a revival of form after what was a difficult opening 2 rounds, and really finding that pace in the feature race in particular. A great result there, and Jack Wyborn completes our top 5 and really starts off the rest of the field in the LMP2 AM class going into this round on 77 points ahead of Jim Stanton in P6 on 72 points. But to be fair, Jim Stanton, of course, with that absolutely brilliant blazing double move at the start of the feature race, which saw him jump from 3rd to 1st, and we're expecting Jim Stanton to be a high flyer tonight. He's only 2 points ahead of Barry Meacham, the Welshman, who, unable to pick up points in the sprint race, picked up a good tally in the feature race on 70 points there, and 2 ahead of Paul Scott, who unfortunately did not pick up any points last time out of Mosport. Neither did Mark Baker, and Richard Stanton there down in P10 on 57 points, but building momentum fast. Outside of the top 10 and looking to get some huge points on the board tonight will be Paul Walton. The RD Simsport driver, of course, only made his presence known on the scene at Road Atlanta in round number 2, was unable to take part at Watkins Glen, unable to take part last time out at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park, and therefore Walton's got it all to do, and we are expecting him to return tonight. And well, if it's going to be anything like Road Atlanta, we're expecting Walton to absolutely fly. Jonathan Collins, meanwhile, last but not least there, on 28 points, and picked up 15 points in the sprint race last time out. Then we come on to our GT3 PRO class in the IMB Raceway lobby. We can see the story here quite similar in the terms of we have a group of leaders who are very nip and tuck, and then we have the rest of the field in hot pursuit. With Lucas Romano still our championship leader going into this round, albeit his lead has now been cut to 4 points, thanks to the combination of misfortune for Romano, particularly when he was leading in the feature race last time out at Mosport, and then Jeremy De Boever, really the driver who picked up a near perfect result through consistency and fortune going his way. The challenged by DB1 driver there, picking up an absolutely colossal haul of 54 points, taking him only 4 for Lucas Romano, and DDD Laming, his teammate, on 108 points, really bringing up the rear in that top 3. Peter Lemkins, meanwhile, with that dismal performance at Mosport on 77 points, and he'll be looking to come back strong tonight after that brilliant showing we saw at Watkins Glen in the season opener. And Dirt Bounce there in P5, 74 points, and Bounce, much like Lemkins, not picking up many points at Mosport at all. Matthew Proutin, however, it did work out for Matthew Proutin last time out with the diminished GT3 PRO field at Mosport, picking up a good haul of points there to put in P6 on 70 points, and then we're expecting Gus Franken, Lamont Wedder, and Sean Scooter to look to try and achieve higher today, particularly Sean Scooter down in P9 then 43 points, who had an absolute nightmare at Mosport in both the sprint and the feature race, just not able to hook the car up the way he'd want, and we're expecting him to push hard today. Meanwhile, in the GT3 AM class, well, the complexion is a little bit different here. In the fact we do have a slightly runaway championship leader on 130 points, and that is Navarro De Boever. And it is the case, of course, last time out, Navarro De Boever and his father, Jeremy De Boever, securing history in the NXTGEN Racing Championship books, with the fact that the father and the son picked up wins in their respective classes in the sprint race at Mosport. And it is the case that whilst Navarro De Boever did not pick up as many points in the feature due to a spin midway through the race, he's still our championship leader by 19 points. However, he has has hot on his heels and trying to close that gap. Lorenzo Gualtieri and also Tristan Di Brega, both drivers there, 111 and 102 points respectively, looking very fast on pace. And if they can deliver it tonight, you can imagine they'll both be right back up there with De Boever come the end of tonight's proceedings. RJ Kriegel and Elwin Sykes both on 90 points there. Kriegel ahead of Sykes based on result countback. And we're not expecting Elwin Sykes to take to the circuit today, unfortunately, due to personal circumstances, but we do wish him well and hope to see him return in the near future. Kurt Van Hoenacker out on 89 points, only one shy of P5 after what was a difficult day for Van Hoenacker. Good result in the sprint, undermined by a disaster in the feature. And then we do have Mark Sykes there in P8 on 83 points, building more momentum into the next gen racing with Sam Case's UK driver, 3 points ahead of James Slates, who had a difficult day at Mosport, and Chris Keenan completes the top 10. And then last but not least there, looking to get some more points to the board today, Liam Tack in P11. And how that translates into the team standings, I hear you ask. Well, in the Mark Sykes Designs team standings, we can see that it's Verano Motorsport currently leading by an increasing margin after their dominant display in Lobby 1, the Apex Racing Academy lobby at Mosport. It is the case now. They are breaking away by 25 points to RP Motorsport Pro-Am. We're challenged by DB1, Next Gen Racing with Sam Cases UK, and Next Gen Racing there, bringing up the top 5. Hillywood Esport, meanwhile, in P6, after a difficult day at Mosport, dropping out of the top 5 and looking to come back tonight. Only ahead on countback ahead of challenged by DB2 in P7, and it's Racing Team Astra Blue ahead of Racing Team Astra Team Orange there in P8 and P9, with Team Racing Evans completed the top 10 on 185 points. In pursuit of them, Team Tetra in P11 with CXR Project Black and Crest Autosport with Apex Track, separated by only 3 points between them, and then Excite Racing and Altitude Esports complete the top 15, before it's Crest Autosport Ferrari there on 150 points, ahead on countback of DRS Esports LMS1, and then RD Sim Sport, TGC Racing and RP Motorsport Celia completed our top 20, and outside the top 20, but not to be forgotten about, it's Team MRC, followed by Hollerton Racing, DRS Esport LMS2, who had a difficult day at Mosport and really need to get some points on the board, BRM, and then TGC's bottom split heroes bringing up the rear in P25 on 33 points. Well, coming from our standings then to the circuit today, we are at the Daytona International Speedway Road Course, as mentioned previously. Daytona Beach, Florida, the state of Florida in the United States of America. And this circuit, as you can see from the circuit map provided to us by simracingwiki.com, consisting of 12 corners. And there's a good mixture of corners here in the fact that turns 1 through to 6 really mark the infield section, and it's the banked oval corners of turns 7 and 12 separated by the bus stop chicane of turns 8 through to 11. And we are expecting the handling cars in the GT3 classes, so particularly the Porsches and the Ferraris, and also the occasional McLaren, to really go well in the infield section, where it's going to be the power cars such as the Mercedes and the BMW that will work very well up on the oval and going through the bus stop chicane. This circuit, of course, a very tactical one in the fact you want to pick the right time to make the overtake due to the power of slipstream on the oval banking, and that's what it's all going to be about, is knowing when to go on the offensive and, well, seeing whether you can make the offensive out on circuit or whether you wait for when you all come into the pits and go for that undercut or overcut. And we'll try and bring you some on-board perspective of a lap around Daytona during the course of the race. Now, as for the rules tonight, but given this is a super endurance round, we have a slight tweak to the rules. Firstly, setups tonight. Our LMP2 class driver shall be running the iRacing Daytona Road setup. Meanwhile, our GT3 driver shall be running the iRacing Medium Downforce setup. And as in general, because this is a super endurance round, there is no qualifying session or sprint race. We'll talk about how the grid is set very shortly, but double points shall be awarded in the feature race. So in the case of the feature race, it is going to be 50 points for the win, not 25. Fastest lap, however, is still worth 2 points. It's not worth double, so it's not worth 4. It's still worth 2. I mean, the maximum points haul from tonight is a grand total of 52 points for the winning driver, who can also try to pick up the fastest lap. In the feature race, the grid shall be set by reverse Drivers' Championship order based on the latest championship standings, so from round 3, and the grid will be separated into car classes, started approximately 10 seconds apart. So the LMP2 AM class will be starting 10 seconds up the road from the GT3s, and I should clarify, the GT3 class will not be separated. So the GT3 Pros and the AMs will be together. The GT3 Pros will start ahead of the AMs, but they will all be one pack of GT3 cars, and of course the order in which they are lined up is based on that reverse Drivers' Championship order, as mentioned previously. As for pit stops today, we have 2 mandatory pit stops, not 1, but 2, which will require drivers to take on fuel and change all 4 tyres at least once. So there is a tyre change requirement today, and that means our drivers can change the tyres all in 1 pit stop, or they can choose to split the tyre change over the 2 pit stops if they so desire. Each driver has 2 fast repairs available, and a driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 25 or more instant points. Well, I think that's enough rules, regulations, and introduction, don't you, folks? I think it's time to go back to those live pictures at the circuit and see how our drivers are all getting on in their final preparations ahead of going racing. Well, we can see the return there of Gareth Mills, finally taken to the circuit as of tonight, the GM racing driver. It's great to see him getting ready to go racing, and we haven't seen too much of Gareth Mills since the start of this season, but he is back tonight and looking to go racing as he parked up in the pit lane there. But looking further around, we do have Paul Scott here from NXTGEN Racing, also making his way on around the circuit with only 1.5 minutes left of the pre-race practice session here, the final practice session that our drivers have had available to them. It's the course of an hour, and we're just coming into the end of it right now, but we've got plenty of racing action ahead. As we say hello there in the multiple chats, and do not be shy, feel free to say hi and talk to us in the chat. We can see the Facebook chat, we can see the YouTube chat, and also the Twitch chat. We say hello there in the Facebook chat to Deborah Grant, also to Craig Cook, and we can also see there Paul Walton, and I believe saying let's go Paul Stuart Walton, and it is the case, I think that's Paul Walton Sr. referring to his son Paul Walton Jr., who is currently parked in the pit lane there and returning tonight for RD Simsport. We also say hello to Freddie Harrison there, and we also in the YouTube chat there say hello to Jeremy De Boever, Navarro De Boever, and also Tristan D. Nobrega. And of course you will see some of the drivers taking part in the chat tonight, folks. Don't think that they're trying to multitask here, although that would be incredible if they were. It is more the case that they are tuning in tonight to see how the race went. Of course, some drivers like to do that for the simple reason they like to see how their own exploits were covered, but also to see what else happened around the circuit, because when you are a racing driver, whether in real world or the sim world, it is the case that you only see your perspective of the race. And if you're right up front, I mean, you can imagine Lorenzo Gualtieri here will want to try and be right at the front of the GT3 pack in terms of the AMs. He may not know what's going on behind him because he's so focused on what's going on ahead of him. As we say hello as well in the YouTube chat to Gareth Mills. And well, we have not got long to go now. This session almost ready to get underway, and well, how's it all going to play out? That will be the big question, and we are just patiently waiting as we get the checkered flag on this final practice session, and then it will be the case that we line up the grid very shortly for 2 hours of racing here at Daytona. And here comes the transition, and as we get ready for that transition, I should say, unfortunately, we won't be able to take you through the grid order like we traditionally will. That is one of the limitations we do have with using a replay file, but what we can do for you in very short order is bring you that blimp camera here and start to see all of our drivers lining up there on the grid. And of course, once the safety car does pull away, our drivers will be starting for a partial warm-up lap today. It'll be a partial manual double file rolling start parade lap. They won't be doing a full lap of the circuit. It will only start halfway around. They start just before the bus stop. We'll take you through that grid order as quickly as we possibly can, given we have got 28 drivers taken to the circuit today across the classes. But a bit of a distant camera view there, the blimp a bit far away at the moment, so let's get you a little bit of a zoom in there, and we can see the Ford Mustang pace car getting ready to go. And indeed, I believe that is one of the more traditional pace cars we see here at Daytona, and well, we are now only waiting moments away from going racing as that grid forms up, and I believe the gridding process is complete, and as all of our drivers get ready to pull off here, we do wait and breathe on. It will be on that front row, it will be Paul Walton and Jonathan Collins in the LMP2 class. Behind them will be the combination of Richard Stanton and Mark Baker, followed by Paul Scott and Jack Wyborn, and there will be Sam Holman and Michael Price on row number 4, and Stephan Wessels lined up at the back of the LMP2 AM class. And then we do have in the GT3 pros, it is the case that we have Sean Scooter lined up on the front row with Gus Franken, then Matthew Prouting and Peter Lemkins behind them, followed by Dirk Bout and Jeremy De Boever, and they make their way side by side right now for the bus stop. And then we do have Liam Tack and Lucas Romano on that next row, with Liam Tack, the lead driver in our GT3 AM class. He starts ahead of James Slate and Chris Keenan, followed by Davide Favo and Mark Sykes. And then we've got Kurt Van Hoenack and Tristan Dino Brega, followed by Arjan Kregel and Lorenzo Gualtieri. And then we've got Navarro De Boever and Gareth Mills bringing up the rear of the field there. But as our drivers make the way through, we look back up towards the front, because right now it'll be our LMP2 drivers who get underway very shortly when the safety car will peel on in, and then we wait for the green. And it's lights out and away we go for 2 hours of racing here at Daytona, as immediately Jonathan Collins goes defensive on the low bound here down into turn number 1. We can see Paul Walton trying to look for that early move around the outside. He can't quite find it. In fact, goes a bit deeper. Mark Baker already into the wall there on cold tyres and gets it wrong under brake in the rear of the car, snatching round on him. And well, that is very unfortunate for Mark Baker. Now, will that trigger a safety car given he was in the wall there? I'm not 100% sure, but what I can tell you is whilst that's happened, all of our GT3 drivers are now coming through, and we can see Peter Lemkins here battling side by side with Matthew Proughton very early on as they come roaring on through. Everybody has safely made it through, minus Baker from what we're hearing, and Baker has finally returned to the circuit. He's been very patient. To be fair, oh goodness me, and behind, that is, I think that's Lucas Romano taking a spin or a tumble around. We can also see Liam Tack there getting a bit of a spin on. Well, it looks like there's been a couple of incidents here in the GT3 class as well, and well, it's the case that Liam Tack and Lucas Romano have both been sent off of the road. As we do look back up to the front of the GT3 field, and we can see that Sean Scutter's had a relatively peaceful one by comparison as they make the way to the end of the infield circuit. But as they come on through, we do look towards the back of what is the GT3 Pro class, and we can see Jeremy De Boever being very patient. And for De Boever at this point, of course, this has worked out quite nicely because his main rival, Lucas Romano, is all the way at the back of this class, but he is 7.5 seconds behind, and he will try and close up in short order. Meanwhile, in the GT3 AM class, it is Kurt Van Hoenacker, the changed by DB2 driver, who is comfortably right now at the head of that pack, but do keep in mind he will have his opponents trying to creep up to him in short order with the slipstream. But meanwhile, I can tell you that at this pack and going up to the LMP2s, it is Paul Walton who has found his way past what is Paul Scott and also Paul Scott past Jonathan Collins, and it's Paul Scott who's found his way past Collins as well and is battling with Richard Stanton as they go on to another lap here. And we're hearing that was made in the slipstream draft coming out of the infield and going over the bank of turn number 7. But right now as our drivers make their way around, we can see that Richard Stanton is trying to get a little bit closer to Paul Scott, but both drivers here very familiar with one another in terms of their battling aspirations, and as they make their way through there, we can see, oh goodness me, and that going a bit wide, that's Collins, and I think that's as well, that's Stephan Wessels who's being collected as part of that. Well, I'm not sure if there's contact between the two of them or whether they both got it wrong, but regardless, both drivers there, and Stephan Wessels in particular, a major contender at the very top of what is the title of the LMP2 AM class right now as they go into this round. It is the case that the championship leaders had an early spin, but to be fair, we do have 2 hours, not 2 minutes of racing, and that does mean he's got a lot of time to make up for it as he makes his way down to turn number 6. As he comes on through, we do look back to our to our GT3 AM class here, and we can see Lorenzo Gutierrez. Well, he's trying to make moves here. Mark Sykes is holding the header in right now, and Navarro De Boever tucked in behind as well as we ride on board with Navarro De Boever here. As we can see Gutierrez going for the move up the inside of Mark Sykes, who gives him the space, and now Navarro De Boever will be hoping that he can get a simple, straightforward move like that coming up into turn 6. But Sykes is held there on the inside line. He wasn't able to peel back into the order, so as they make the way through turn 6, it is the case that they come out onto the banking now, and well, Navarro De Boever, he's in a bit of a pinch here, given the fact he has not been able to find a way through, and behind him is Tristan Dino Brega. It is the case that right now Navarro De Boever, the championship leader, he's had one of his 2 main rivals get ahead, and now he's got the pain of trying to find his way past Mark Sykes in that Audi. No slouch on the straights here as the Ferrari finally picks up enough speed in 6th gear, but you can see Dino Brega there looking to go between the two of them. It's going to be 3 wide into the bus stop chicane, and the Brega does the Moses manoeuvre and finds his way between the two of them. Now that is brave from the Racing Team Astra Blue driver, but sometimes you've got to be brave to win, and right now he's definitely thrown all of his chips in and said I'm going for it, and he's made it happen. My goodness, and the South African there, well, to be fair, I wouldn't have gambled that, but I think that shows you the difference between him and some of the other drivers around. He's dreaming to believe, and he's gone for it. But now Navarro De Boever comes back here, and these two, of course, title rivals as they make their way onto another lap. And well, Navarro De Boever's going to try and go around the outside here. Dino Brega's going to hold the low line. Our drivers have to stay above the yellow line we're battling, and as they make their way into turn number 1, Dino Brega goes a little deep, but he brings the nose round there. As we're hearing that Chris Keenan's had a bit of a moment on the circuit, and right now as well, that is Mark Baker in between the drivers, and of course he's the LMP2 AM class driver who had that spin right at the start of the race and trying to find his way back up to his LMP2 buddies or pals or opponents, we could say, as he makes his way out of turn number 3 and up towards 5. But as they roll on through here, it is the case. We look a bit further up the road to see here Dirt Bounce battling with DD aiming for P5 in the GT3 Pro class, and as they make the way out to turn number 5 and head up towards 6, it is the case the Belgian, the RP Mosport senior driver, getting on the offensive nice and early here. But the thing for him It's the reason why he wants to get away from DDD Blaming is because the driver ahead of him, who we're going to be shortly riding on board with, right on board the gearbox of, is Gus Franken, the RP Motorsport senior teammate. And what that means is effectively that they, Bounce and also Franken, can work together, do a little bit of slipstream exchange, and therefore save some fuel for one another and maintain a solid pace as they make their way down into the Bus-stop chicane. And we're in that Mark Sykes has had a jump to the pit, was coming to the pits due to damage and just left the pits after repair work. In fact, I think he's just come into the pits and had to do repair work. He's at the back of his class right now, and that is not out for Mark Sykes at all. But focus on the here and now, and see Gus Franken here and his teammate Dirt Bounce trying to go around the outside of him. They're not daring to bump draft here. It's more the case that they simply just want to avoid making contact and instead slipstream through. Now, I promise they do have Mark Baker coming on the high line, but Mark Baker has cleared them quite nicely. Now, does Franken have enough momentum here, or will it be the case Bounce is able to hold that inside line? Well, in the end, Franken just about has enough momentum. Sorry, Bounce has enough momentum, and Franken in the actually locks up the brakes slightly and almost loses it coming into turn number one. And as they make the way on through, now it is the case that DDD Blaming will be looking to go on the offensive versus Gus Franken in very short order as they make the way down into the horseshoe hairpin here at turn 3. As it's known, it is the case that now we can see Peter Lemkins trying to come on through as well. And Peter Lemkins, after that difficult day at what was Mosport last time out, it is the case the Belgian now really trying to come back on strong here. And his teammate Lucas Romano all the way down in P8 right now, not quite in the camera shot and trying to recover and get his way back into this race as well. But in terms of the action, a lot of the action has been focused more centrically in towards the GT3 class at the moment. As we see Lemkins there getting a little bit of snap oversteer on exit, trying to get the power down. The car just saying no, and as he makes his way through turn number 6 and heads up onto the banking here, well, I think Peter Lemkins has got to find another way on through. Now, we do know that the Mercedes has been recorded as being the fastest accelerator in this GT3 class here at Daytona, and it does have very good top end speed, but where the Ferrari excels, if it can get the draft when it's going through 5th and 6th gear, that Ferrari really starts to pick up legs, and you can see it now as they come down to the back straight section here and to the bus stop. Lemkins look into the inside here, he's going to have the momentum, and I do not imagine, well, they're going to go side by side here. I was going to say, I don't imagine Blaming battling this one too hard this early on. They're only 7 minutes into the 2 hours, but he's going for it. He's deciding, no, I'm not letting this one go, and they're carrying on racing. Well, credit to them as they make the way on around once again here and head towards the end of a lap. Now, as they come on through, we do see that whilst they're at the back of this pack, they're by no means out of the fight because they come down towards another lap here. The next driver behind them is James Slate's battling with Kurt Van Hoenacker for the lead of the GT3 AM class, but right now Lemkins having to go high once again. Blaming is not letting him go here. He does not want the RP Motorsport driver to catch up to his teammates, and Lemkins goes very deep. He's going to go around the outside. It's very brave stuff from Lemkins, and I think he's almost there to doing it, but in the end, just not enough momentum on exit. Now he's going to have to be brave on the brakes here. He's going in. He's going all in his Lemkins, and Blaming respects the space on the inside, and as they make the way out the corner, well, Lemkins, to be fair, he's still in this one. They're side by side as they come out of turn 3, but I think he's fine. He's sealed the deal on the move, or has he? He's going to have to go a little bit deep into 4 and stay on the inside into 5 to cover it off, but I think Peter Lemkins has done it in a very hard-fought move. In the end, Peter Lemkins has found his way into P6. Now, can he catch up to Gus Franken, his teammate ahead of him, who's 1.5 seconds up the road? But we look from them to a little bit further down the order, and I'm hearing that, well, it looks like Gareth Mills has had a slight off as we're seeing some dust kicking up there, and that is Lorenzo Gualtieri just ahead of him right now, who has just passed Gareth Mills. I'm also hearing that Kurt Van Hoenacker's had an off. He's down in P6. Now, I'm not sure what's happened, and unfortunately, we can't take a look back and have a look. That's one of the limitations we do have here today with regards to the technology available, but Kurt Van Hoenacker has lost 2 places only moments ago, and the challenge by DB2 driver is not having a happy day in this race in the opening 10 minutes. But we talked a lot about our GT3 drivers. We do need to come to the head of the GT3 AM pack because right now James Slates in the RP Motorsport Pro Am Audi R8 is battling with Tristan Dino Brega here in the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo. Now as they make the way around to complete this current lap, and I'm hearing that Gareth Mills has had an off track. Oh goodness, well, I think something really heavy has happened. We do cut away briefly. That's Gareth Mills who's had a major man, and Lorenzo Gualtieri has also been with him at the bus stop chicane. But we come back to that battle for the leader GT3 AM class. It's Slates on the inside here as they come down towards 1. Tristan Neobrega tries to go around the outside. They've got a little bit of traffic in front of them in the form of DDD Blaming, but it's not going to hurt either of them here. And as they make their way through the corner, James Slates holds the lead for now. And it is the case, the RP Motorsport Pro Am driver, well, he is absolutely determined to dig in and hold onto this lead. And to give credit to him, due where it's due. It is the case that right now he's making Tristan Nienabrega work for that lead. If he wants to come on through, he's going to have to be a little bit inventive with how he makes the pass. But as they head down towards turn number 5 here, we look back up to LMP2 Pro class, and in particular we look to Michael Price here, as we see in the rear of the picture. Well, that is Richard Stanton trying to find his way past what is Stephan Wessels there. In fact, Wessels has just passed Stanton down the inside line into turn 1 from what I'm hearing in my ear, and it is the case that right now Richard Stanton focusing more, I think, on battling with Michael Price rather than trying to keep Stephan Wessels at bay, given the fact I think he anticipates the Wessels may have a little bit more pace at this point in the race, and they're focusing more on what they can do and not pushing the car too hard, because we do know in this LMP2 class, whilst there's 2 mandatory stops today, we have heard and we saw in the Apex Racing Academy lobby on Wednesday that there was a huge risk factor of a 3rd stop being needed for fuel. So I think some of our LMP2 AM drivers here might be trying to do some early fuel saving to avoid that additional pit stop, because the pit stop around here at Daytona is going to cost the driver, just for a quick splash and dash, it's going to cost them in excess of 30 seconds for certain, and that is a painful amount of time to spend in the pits if you only need to put 1 or 2 litres in to make it to the end of the race. That's not what you want to do. But right now Richard Stanton falling away from Stephan Wessels here as they make their way down that back straight. As they come right on through here, well, how can Wessels find his way to gain that position? Well, I think he's going to have to be patient. To be fair, these LMP2 at Dallara P217 machines do pick up a huge overspeed in the draft, so I can imagine as he makes the out, and we ride on board here with Wessels, you can see Michael Price doing a little mini weave there, coming up onto the banking of turn 12. He's only allowed to weave once, and then it is the case that he has to fix himself to a line as per the rules and regulations of this series. And as they come up behind traffic here, well, they both cut their way through the GT3 traffic, but you can see the overspeed that Wessels has here as they make their way up towards turn number 1. He's going to look to the outside. He's going to be very brave on the brakes, and as they come on through, where Wessels can get this done, it's going to be a colossal move. Not quite, but he's putting the pressure there on Michael Price, and he's showing to Price he's here, and he's looking for the move as Price goes defensive into the horseshoe hairpin, and as they come out to turn 3, it is the case that Wessels all over the back in the battle for P4 in the LMP2 AM class. They roll on through and head up towards turn number 5. Now, as they continue to navigate their way through some of the GT3 traffic that they come up against now, of course, the nature of multi-class racing does dictate that they will see some traffic as they make their way onto subsequent laps. And they roll on through here as we hear that Jonathan Collins has had a bit of a moment at turn number 3. I'm not exactly sure what's happened. He's had a bit of an off track. He's down in P7 in the class. We do look a bit further down the order, because I can tell you that Peter Lemkins right now has made his way past Gus Franken. He made his way past Gus Franken on the previous lap, and now he is going hunting after Dirt Bouts, his teammate here for RP Mosport Pro Am, as they make their way up onto turn number 12. Now, as they roll on through here, well, Peter Lemkins, I think, will not mind the fact that he'll have the tow of his teammates for a brief one. They may have worked out the sort of strategy between them in terms of who's going to play what role over the course of this race. They all want to get points, keeping in mind, of course, there's a team championship and also a driver's championship for each of the classes. But right now, Lemkins absolutely flying in the GT3 Pro class, it has to be said, as he sets a 14.06 there. Gus Frank now with the fastest lap of a personal best of 46.648. Goodness me, and that is Matthew Prouting, who's had something gone wrong. He's gone a bit deep into turn 1 and spun the car, and Matthew Prouting, only moments ago, was running all the way up in P2 in the GT3 Pro class, has dropped all the way down to P6, and that is absolutely punishing for the Eclipse Racing driver, who was looking very good early on in this race. There's still plenty of time to come on back here. We're not even 15 minutes into the 2 hours, and still plenty of racing action on the horizon. But as he brings himself back up to speed, I can tell you that he does have Sean Scudder, who's a little bit further back here. Sean Scudder being 1.3 seconds off, and will be looking to get involved as soon as he possibly can. As we see Sam Holman, they're going very deep, and that is, well, I believe, unless I'm mistaken, that's Lucas Romano coming past Navarro De Boever there, the GT3 Pro driver coming through past the GT3 AM driver, and De Boever deciding to go very deep into turn 5 to avoid losing any excessive time battling with the GT3 Pro driver, because there's no points up for grabs for battling the driver in a different class. There may be a little bit of prestige as an AM driver if you beat a Pro, of course, but it doesn't get you anything in your championship, so it's not really worth battling unless you are out front or in your position that you're going to hold to the end of the race. And Navarro De Boever showing a lot of awareness of that, of course. Indeed, most of our drivers are showing a huge amount of awareness, if not all of them, as we do look from Navarro De Boever to one of his main rivals in the class, and that is Lorenzo Gualtieri right now, the Racing Team Astra Orange driver, who after that contact, and I do believe from what I'm hearing, there was a potential contact moment between himself and Gareth Mills down the bus stop chicane, although I haven't had that confirmed, to be fair. That's just what I'm surmising from what we saw on our radar scan. It is the case that right now Gualtieri trying to find his way past Gareth Mills as we ride on board with the Lamborghini Huracan driver here. Well, Gareth Mills is going to defend low, so Gualtieri is going to have to go high. It's going to be Porsche versus Lamborghini, or should I say Audi power, given the fact that Lamborghini's got the same V10 Audi engine, I should say, as in the Audi R8. Well, regardless of how you pronounce it or phrase it, it is the case. Gualtieri trying to find a way past the Porsche. He's looking from the outside to the inside. He's got to be careful going too low. He can't cross the yellow line to make the move. And Gualtieri constantly trying to fake a move on the outside. He goes very heavy on the brakes here, but Gareth Mills holds that inside line with conviction, using the rotation of the Porsche there and its brakes to good effect. And as they make the way through turn 2 and up into 3, Gareth Mills will not be perturbed here. He's not going to give in, as we hear Chris Keenan's had a moment on circuit and has jumped to the pits. He's dropped down to the P11 in the GT3 AM class, and he'll be repaired in the pit lane in short order. We can see here as Jonathan Collins comes through, flashing his lights there, making his way around the outside of Gareth Mills. Gualtieri runs onto the grass, 2 wheels to the grass, and overcooks it under braking. He gets the car stopped on circuit, and well, I think Gareth Mills there, not knowing where Gualtieri was going to come from, he's been able to keep it just on track. I think it's a legal move, and as they make the way into turn number 6, was a bit of elbows out there from Gualtieri. I think a bit of frustration kicking in how long it's taken him to find a way past Mills, but he's done it in the end. But to be fair to Gareth Mills as well, he's shown a lot of pace here on his return to the series tonight, and the GM racing machine, well, he'll be coming on strong later in the race. I think the top 5's on the cards for Gareth Mills right now, given the fact he's looking quite strong, as we say hello to Darren Doherty in the Facebook chat there. But as we see Mills making his way up down towards the bus stop chicane here behind Gualtieri, we do look back up to our GT3 Pro class here, and we can see as they make their way to the end of their current lap, to the end of their 9th tour of the circuit, and they go on to a 10th one. Here's Matthew Prouting here battling with what is DD Blaming for P5 in the GT3 Pro class. It's going to be the front engine machines battling side by side. And right now, Blaming goes very deep under braking, and Matthew Prouting will pick up the P5 there by simply cutting to the inside. Now for Matthew Prouting, of course, after that one mistake which happened earlier on at that exact corner where DD Blaming just went a bit deep, is the case that he will want to settle himself down into rhythm and start to recover this race. And to be fair, the GT3 Pro class is not separated by much of a margin right now. Matthew Prouting to the leader of the class, Jeremy De Boever, the gap is only in the region of about 6 seconds, so they've all got it to play for there, as DD Blaming takes a few cones with him for good measure going into the braking zone for turn number 5. I think they're challenged by DB1 driver, just not in a rhythm right now, being a little bit unsettled and trying to get himself back into the run of momentum as they make their way on around the lap. Now as they come on through, I am hearing, unless I'm very much mistaken, that Lorenzo Gualtieri has had another moment somewhere on the lap, and in fact he's now back down to P7, so that's Gareth Mills and Arjen Kregel back up in position. And well, speaking of the Dutchman of Arjen Kregel, in terms of if you're wondering where he is, well, here is Arjen Kregel enjoying the racing as he makes his way on through. He's just tucked in behind right now Davide Favo, who's just ahead of him. They're very similar looking cars, the Team Racing Netherlands Ferrari and also the Racing Team Astra Orange Lamborghini, in terms of their paint schemes or their liveries, as we like to refer to them. But if you want to be able to tell the slight difference between the two of them, it is the case that the shade of orange on Arjen Kregel's Team Racing Netherlands Ferrari is a little bit brighter, plus he also has the Shaft Motorsport labelled down the side of the car as they make their way into the bus stop chicane here, whereas in the Racing Team Astra machine down the side of the car is the RTA logo, or the Racing Team Astra logo abbreviated, as they make their way up into turn 12. But as they come on through here, Arjen Kregel trying to dig deep, but we'll have to wait and see what he's able to pull off as he makes his way on the banking. Now as they come on through and head towards the end of another lap, we do look a bit further up the road to Stephan Wessels here, who are looking to hunt after Michael Price. And well, he tried to find that move earlier on, it didn't quite work out, and he's still in that hunt versus Price as they come through turn number 6 here. And Wessels right now, I think, might be playing the long-term game. We're now into that almost 20-minute window of the race complete, and what this means now, and we see this typically in the feature race as well, in the 1 hour feature races when we're not in a super endurance round, this is where the racing settles down a little bit in terms of drivers start to think more about their strategy, thinking about that potential fuel saving needed, and we do know that the LMP2 class here today at Daytona does have a major concern with respect to fuel saving they do have to worry about as they make their way on around. Now, we haven't talked about one driver in particular. I can see a number of you speaking. Oh, goodness me. And Michael Price there with a slowdown for track limits at the bus stop chicane. He served that very quickly, and Stephan Wessels literally going through like a missile there. And, well, Wessels moves up to P4. But the one driver who's at the head of this class right now, we haven't talked too much about him for the simple reason after a blistering start, he's just run off into the distance, albeit 2.5 seconds clear of Paul Scott, is Paul Walton from RD Simsport, who right now on his return to the series, well, he's continuing as he left off at Road Atlanta, which is to be leading the class and leading it well with the fastest lap also in his hands. Well, I would say the fastest lap in his hands, but actually that's Paul Scott on 34.74, whereas Paul Walton has a 34.79 registered against him. So not quite the fastest lap yet, but he'll be looking to try and grab that later on as he makes his way into turn at number 6. And we say hello there to Mark Grant in the Facebook chat, who I believe is cheering on Paul Walton as he makes his way up into the banking. As Walton makes his way around, Paul Scott just behind him here. Now, of course, the challenge will be for Paul Scott in particular is if he pushes too hard to close down Walton. Here, it works one of two ways here. If he pushes hard enough, could he potentially force Walton into an unenforced error? Walton will keep looking at a timer behind him, see that Scott's constantly there, try to up his pace a little bit more, and then make a mistake that could prove costly later on. Potentially so. But if Scott pushes too hard, of course, he may take too much life out the tyres. He may use excessive fuel and need that extra third pit stop, and that could also be a concern for Scott. So therefore he's got to balance this pace in this run right now as he makes his way up into the bank into turn 12. And we say hello in the YouTube chat there to Stephan Wessels. But as we look from our LMP2 drivers back to Peter Lemkins here, the P2 driver in the GT3 PRO class, we can see right now chasing after Jeremy De Boever, and we're now starting to enter the freeway train here of what is Jeremy De Boever at the head of the GT3 PRO pack, with Peter Lemkins and Dirt Bounce equivalently 6 tenths of a second between one another. So Peter Lemkins 6 tenths behind De Boever and 6 tenths ahead of Dirt Bounce. And the thing for these guys, of course, now is they have to think about, do they run in the slipstream train? And it's a bit of a joke down in the paddock. Our drivers love to joke about this in terms of in the pre-practice when they were practicing earlier this week, and also they've joked about it in previous seasons when we raced at Daytona. But it's very true in terms of you have to play this tactical game of sit in the slipstream with the guy in front of you and try to save some fuel, because if you do so, it means you can push harder later on in the race, and you may have a slightly shorter pit stop compared to your opponent ahead of you when you do come into the pits, particularly if you come in at the same time, and you can gain as a result. And right now, I think that's exactly how the story's playing out. But I can tell you one driver who is not abiding by that rule, and that is Matthew Proutin, the Eclipse Racing driver here, who after that spin earlier that dropped him from second place in the class all the way down to the back of it, well, he is coming on through, and he is looking now for the move on Gus Franken here into turn number 1, and no way through right now for Matthew Proutin. Gus Franken holds line very well in the rather distinctive livery there for the RP Motorsport team that Gus Franken's running, also his teammate of what is Dirt Bounce running. I think those are bears on the car from what I understand. I'm not sure what the story behind that is, but I know they're quite happy with their liveries. They're very distinctive liveries. But right now the Eclipse Racing driver Matthew Proutin trying to find a way past what is the bare-powered Mercedes as they make the way through turn number 4 and up towards 5. And as they roll into the corner, you can see De Boever there, a bit of a spectator as Matthew Proutin looks to the inside there, looks that potential snap onto the brakes, but he can't quite find it. And that's the thing Proutin's got the problem with now, is the fact that he's got to try and find a way to get past, but he can't afford to do it just as they're about to exit. Oh, goodness me, and Matthew Proutin and also Gus Franken, they're both getting some snap oversteer when they got the power down. In fact, Gus Franken having some understeer initially on corner exit that turned into oversteer when he overcooked the steering wheel, and then meanwhile Matthew Proutin just getting oversteer when he tried to get the power down to look up the inside. Both of them are pushing hard here, and you can tell that those mistakes have been costly, because now De Boever is right there with them as they concertina their way into the bus stop chicane. Now, as they make the way on in, we are hearing, looking away from them, Lorenzo Gutierrez had a spin at turn number 6 and just got clear there of what was Paul Scott coming on through. But Gutierrez having a very difficult day at the office, and this is not working out for him at all as he brings himself back up to speed. Peace in the GT3 AM class, but we look from him to the battle for the lead of the GT3 Pro class, and now as they head into turn 1 here, he's just at the fastest lap. Peter Lemkins on the outside versus Jeremy De Boever defending to the inside, and Lemkins wants to try and get this move done early. He doesn't find it, however. Instead, he tucks in behind, and well, Jeremy De Boever here has got a lot of pressure building as Lemkins looks to the outside here, down to the horseshoe hairpin. Now, as they go into the right-hander, you can see Jeremy De Boever having to go defensive so early on here. What it's meaning is it is giving Peter Lemkins better positioning of the car. He can choose, does he go for the cutback? Does he try and bring the car all the way around the outside? Does he just tuck in? And this is not what you want in an early stage of this race right now, because Jeremy De Boever has to take more life out of the tyres to do these defensive moves. He has to then put more pressure on the brakes as well, and he potentially has to use even more fuel in order to stay ahead. Meanwhile, Lemkins can stay with him. Of course, Lemkins will be taking some life out of the car here to put this pressure on, but Jeremy De Boever is the one who's really got to manage the car and also try and keep ahead right now as they make the way out to the infield and up onto the banking here. And behind them is Dirt Bounce, and Dirt Bounce should not be forgotten about. He's only 1.1 seconds off of the two leaders battling, but he's there in a little bit of a quite supportive role to Peter Lemkins if needed. The RP Motorsport senior driver here, I think if he can get involved in that battle and support his RP Motorsport Pro Am teammate, then he definitely will as they make the way down what is the back straight here into the bus stop chicane. But Lemkins being patient here and waiting for that opportunity once again as they roll on up onto turn number 12. But we look from them to the battle for towards the front of the GT3 AM class here, and we look to James Slates, who's trying to put some pressure on Navarro De Boever. Now, James Slates, of course, lost the lead of the class after a brief error. Tristan Dino Brigger is the leader of this class by 12.3 seconds currently, but James Slates trying to battle here with Navarro De Boever for second place, and as they make the way up into the bank in the turn at number 12, it is the case that the RP Motorsport Pro Am driver here in the rather tricky Ferrari, the rather tricky Audi, very sensitive car to drive, and I think he's actually serving a slowdown there for track limits. He's falling away from the back of Navarro De Boever, and this may give the Ferrari driver a little bit of breathing room as he makes his way down towards the first corner. Once again, we can see Mark Baker cutting around the outside here. Mark Baker trying to get himself back into the race after that disaster on the opening lap at this very corner. As Mark Baker locks the brakes up there, a bit of brake dust kicking up, and as he makes his way out of turn number 1 and heads through 2 and up into 3. In this case, Mark Baker pushing it very hard indeed as they come down into the braking zone for turn at number 3. Now, as we look from them, we do look back up to our LMP2 AM class, and particularly our LMP2 AM leader here of Paul Walton. I should say over the last couple of laps, Paul Walton is being closed in very gradually by Paul Scott, and you can see Walton in the head of the camera and then Paul Scott just behind. In this case, the RD Simsport driver being closed down with the next gen racing driver at this point in the race as they navigate the traffic there. Walton having to go up the inside of James Slates into turn 5. That will cost him some momentum coming out of turn 5 because he won't be able to exit the corner with a more open steering lock by comparison with Paul Scott, and this could just be the wrong time for Walton to collect that traffic, and it could cost him a tenth or two. We can see a good number of you there in the Facebook chat cheering on Paul Walton, and we also say hello to Rich Stanton and Audi R8 there in the YouTube chat. Hopefully you're both doing well. And to everyone tuning in, I hope you're having a great day, and do let me know who you're cheering on in the chat if you haven't already. Don't be shy, feel free to say hi, as we do see Paul Scott here trying to hunt down Paul Walton. The gap between the two of them, 1.5 seconds here, and gradually closing, 1.3 in fact, as they break into the bus stop chicane. As we look from them, we look a little bit further back to Gus Franken here, who has just yielded a P6 to Lucas Romano, and there's Lucas Romano to give you an idea, the BMW M4 driver, and behind the pair of them, we just saw it there briefly, we take a look back, it does look as though Didier De Boever with a very bumped up front end on that Mercedes. Now, I think he's been in some small contact. I'm not sure who with, but Didier De Boever has definitely been in the wars, and the front end of that Mercedes is not looking as glamorous as it used to as he makes his way into turn 1. You can see him unsettled under braking there. And that front end damage, just a little bit of damage to the front area, that will just cause the front end of the car to be a bit less settled under key moments, such as braking, going through medium speed corners as well. And Didier De Boever, they're trying to look for the move versus Gus Franken. He goes way too deep into turn 3. And it's just not his day. And really, this is much like what happened at Mosport in a way last week, and the fact that Blanken's just not in a happy place with the car at this point in time, not able to settle into that rhythm. Perhaps it's the case that some things have not gone right for Vlaming today. We'll have to wait and find out how it plays out later on, but right now not in the place he wants to be with that Mercedes as he comes on through. But as we look from him to a little bit further up the road, I can tell you that Lucas Romano has just found his way past Matthew Prouting, and Prouting has, well, on that last lap, Prouting was faster than Romano, but I think Prouting's made an error. In fact, I'm hearing in my ear that Prouting made an error going through the infield and coming back out of turn number 6 here, but Prouting's now going to be looking for the move. It's BMW on BMW here as they make their way down the back straight. Prouting on the outside outside, close to the wall, versus Romano trying to hold the inside line into the bus stop chicane. Can the Briton get the edge? He can. He goes round the outside, and well, I think Lucas Romano there was very sensible as we ride on board the gearbox here of Matthew Prouting as they now get themselves back up to speed, heading on to the second part of the oval to complete the lap. Now, what do I mean about Lucas Romano being sensible? Well, there's no need for the two of them to fight overly coming into the bus stop chicane, given how early in the race it is. Plus, also, if you tuck in behind your opponent coming out the bus stop chicane, you get this splendid run as you're seeing right now. Lucas Romano is getting larger and larger in the rearview mirror as they make their way across the timeline and so on to another lap. And that is how you can work it out sometimes. In these early junctures of the race, where we're almost a quarter of the way in, you want to be the guy who plays it smart. You want to take those little bits of fuel saving. You can say just 0.1 of a litre over the course of 2 laps. That 0.1 of a litre will stack up over the course of successive laps, and it can benefit you massively later on. And also, it gives you an opportunity to put pressure on the driver in front. As we see there, Prouting goes a little bit deep into the horseshoe hairpin of turn 3, and as a result, that means that Romano gets even closer as they make their way down towards turn number 5. Now, as they roll them through, we look from them to the battle between James States and Navarro De Boever. And, well, I think Navarro De Boever's actually had a bit of an off there. He's going quite slowly, Navarro De Boever, as he makes his way back up to speed. We're not hearing that he's had a confirmed off. I think he's just gone overly deep into the turn 3 hairpin, and he's dropped to P3. James States has gained the place, but it's definitely been a bit of a moment as Mark Baker's into the pits from what was P9 of the MP2 AM class. We're also hearing that Liam Tack and Chris Keener in. We're hearing there's a retirement for Kurt Van Hoenacker. So Kurt Van Hoenacker has not had a day he wants to remember. Oh, goodness me. And James States and Stephan Wessels there both spun. And I think there might have been a little bit of moment between the two of them. Slates is back up to speed. And Stephan Wessels right now, well, he's in P5 in the LMP2 AM class. He knocks some cones flying. I think in a bit of frustration kicking in here as he gets himself back up to speed. But I do know that Wessels is one of those drivers that after an incident occurs, he'll very quickly settle back down and get into a rhythm. But right now, the Racing Team Astra Blue driver has not had a race that's been smooth sailing, and he's got it all to do once again. The one plus side he does have, however, is that compared to his peers, he is one of the fastest in class. The only two drivers who are faster are the top two, Paul Scott and Paul Walton on average, and that will, I think, give Wessels some confidence later on in the race in terms of being able to close up. As meanwhile, we go from one Racing Team Astra Blue driver to another, and that is Tristan Di Nobrega here in the Racing Team Astra Blue Ferrari 488, as he makes his way down towards turn 3. He's just lit up our timing screens with the fastest lap in the GT3 AM class, which was a 45.32 that last time around here. It is the case that Di Nobrega is absolutely on fire right now, 20 seconds ahead of Navarro De Boever, and continuing to break away as we're hearing that Navarro De Boever has, of course, past James Slates, with Slates having that spin at turn 6 with Stephan Wessels. We believe the two of them may have had a little bit of coming together, and well, Tristan Di Nobrega having to navigate that traffic at dirt bounce and getting very close to the back of bounce. In fact, having to really snap on the brakes at last moment to stop the car from tapping the rear. And right now, Di Nobrega, I think, just focusing on bringing this one home for a big 50 points. Meanwhile, Richard Stanton has had a moment at turn 1. He's had an off, and as he gets the speed back up, it is the case that Richard Stanton, well, one of those situations whereby the privateer here, he's not had a happy moment at turn 1. He's dropped down the order of the P6 in the class, and now he's got it all to do once again. 24 seconds of Stephan Wessels, and now he will have to try and up the pace a little bit to close on up. We'll wait and see what happens later on as we move into the second quarter of this race. We are 32 minutes in by the time Stanton emerges out of turn 5 and up towards 60 runs, and it will be the case. Still plenty of racing action to come. And speaking of racing action, we can see that right at the head of the GT3 Pro pack, they've been like this for some time. It's still Jeremy De Boever holding on to their lead, as we see there Sam Holman having to go below the yellow line, and I wonder how the stewards will look at that, in the fact that overtaking is not permitted below the line. Although, to be fair, he was lapping his way past what was another class. I think he might be given an exception there due to the fact they were going wide. But Peter Lemkins goes round the outside. He's tried this before, but he's just not got the grip on exit. He's got his nose in there on the exit, but it's not quite enough. And that Mercedes is so strong when the power goes down, and that is working advantages for Jeremy De Boever. To be fair, Lemkins doing everything he can in order to be able to find a way through, but Jeremy De Boever here just finding a way to frustrate Peter Lemkins. And to be fair, these two great friends off circuit, great rivals on circuit. I know there's a lot of camaraderie between the two of them. They absolutely love racing one another, both of them of course hailing from Belgium, and as they make their way out to turn 5 and up towards 6, it is the case right now. I think they're both loving this, albeit I think Lemkins might be starting to get an itch that he wants to scratch, and that is the will to get past Jeremy De Boever. He's got to find a way, and it can't be at turn 1, or if he's going to do it at turn 1, he's got to find a way to get under the skin of Jeremy De Boever and get the Mercedes driver to make a mistake, because right now De Boever seems to know exactly where to put that Mercedes just to stay ahead, although Lemkins, to be fair, is getting braver every lap in terms of taking those outside lines. It's brilliant to see, and to be fair, if you want to do it in a car, that Ferrari, with the rear grip it has, and particularly that weight transfer on the rear of the car, because it's mid-engine rear-wheel drive, it has that capacity as they make their way out of the bus stop chicane and heading up towards 12. As I head onto the oval, I can tell you that the front of the LMP2 AM class, we do have, it's Paul Scott who's ahead. Well, we haven't quite seen where this has happened, but I'm actually hearing in my ear now it is the case that they've exchanged places over the run down towards turn 1. So it was in the slipstream draft, and Walton in the end had Paul Scott coming through, but now it's Paul Scott who is leading in the LMP2 AM class as they make their way down towards turn number 5. Now, should this be a major concern for Paul Walton? I don't think so at this time. It will mean now the roles are reversed in terms of Walton can now think about managing the car and trying to do a little bit of fuel saving, a little bit of fuel preservation, a little bit of tyre management here. But the RD Simsport driver has been reeled in, and well, that last lap from Paul Scott, a 34.71. To give you an idea, that is another fastest lap of the race, a slightly improved one compared to the 34.72 that Paul Scott had achieved previously, and as they make the way now down towards the bus stop chicane here, it's all to play for these two as they make the way in towards the chicane. Now, I think what we will see as time goes on here is that Walton will stay in the draft or do his best to, and it's going to be to Scott to then have to manage that gap and try to open up. Alternatively, he may have to back off and see if Walton wants to take the lead once again. And if anyone's been recently watching Formula 1, you'll know about a little bit of controversy over the last few years with regards to drag reduction system zones, or DRS zones, where who wants to be at the head of the DRS zone when they go into it in terms of getting that activation, or even just getting the slipstream down the long straights, Monza qualifying sessions. And it's a similar situation here. Do you really want to be the guy who's got to punch the hole in the air when you can also be the guy who's tucked in behind in the pack, as we have a little bit of smoke kicking up there coming into turn number 1, and I think that might be from a moment with Liam Tack only moments ago. But I do think at the moment that Walton does have a plan up his sleeve, and we say hello there in the YouTube chat to Paul Walton himself, who is tuning in as the drivers make their way around. And let's not forget about right now Sam Holman in P3, the Hollerton racing driver, who after what was a little bit of a difficult start, running a comfortable P3 right now, albeit in a battle with Michael Price, who's in the pit lane. I think Price might be going for his first pit stop as Holman goes around Mark Sykes there, and as they roll through, we'll wait to see how it all plays on out for the Briton. Meanwhile, Stephan Wessels, he takes P4 with Price in the pits here, and it's the case that Wessels has yet to take a pit stop. We've had a bit of clarification from Wessels himself as to what happened. That he's attributed the incident earlier on at turn 3 here, and I think that's referring to the contact of the moment with Navarro De Boever, that it is the case that Wessels feels that it was his fault, the incident. And also with regards to what happened up at turn 6 between himself and James Slates, it sounds as though James Slates initially lost it, and well, it's the case that Wessels was collected as past that from what we're hearing, and everything happening in one lap, which is very unfortunate. But again, Wessels digging in and getting on with the job. And we are also hearing there with regards to Kurt Van Hoenacker, who has retired from this race, it is the case that he had contact from Lorenzo Gualtieri, and we did think there was some contact between the two of them earlier on, and as a result, after coming into the pits, they've had a look at the car, they've done some repair work to the car. That repair work has not worked out, and they have not been able to get the car back out on circuit in the end, and that is a shame. Our first retirement of the race, as we see Paul Walton now taking the lead, as Paul Scott has come into the pits from the lead of the LMP2 AM class here. So it's all happening now as we make our way towards 40 minutes. Price has just left the pit lane. Michael Price has just left, I should say, and he's had a very long stop. I believe that may be a full set of tyre change. And with Scott in, Sam Holman also in here. So with that in mind, I think Holman doing this as a bit of a reaction here to the leaders pitting to try and follow their strategy. Meanwhile, we look from what is now a tactical LMP2 class to what is a more out on circuit battling class, and it is still in the GT3 PRO class here. The battle between Jeremy De Boever and Peter Lemkins for the lead as they make their way down the run towards turn number 1 as they come across that timeline. Lemkins is looking for it again here. He's got the overspeed, and De Boever goes a little bit to the middle of the road, but Lemkins just does not have the space to go for that potential move. He thought about it. I thought he was going to try and get his nose in there, but De Boever very smart. And what you can tell here, and this shows you someone who knows where you can put the car on the circuit. So you're probably wondering, why did De Boever lift off of the low line slightly? Why did he put the car in the middle? The reason he did that is because when you're battling into turn 1 at Daytona, going down the inside, if you go down on a very low line, what the driver on the outside can do is really hold you to that line. And the tighter you go in towards turn 1, the closer you are to the left-hand side of the road, the less grip there is, and the braking distance, or where you need to brake, becomes greater to stop the car to make the corner. And that's what De Boever was doing. He was making it so that if Lemkins wanted to go for the move, he had the space to go for it, but he would then need to literally snatch the brakes much earlier than De Boever, by approximately 5 to 10 metres earlier than De Boever, in order to be able to get the move or get the car stopped. And that is what De Boever's doing. He's making it so that Lemkins has either got to go the long way round and take life out of the right hand side tyres of the car because it's a left hand corner, or he's going to have to go up the inside and master the art of braking and find a way to stop a Ferrari which has an overspeed going into turn 1. So De Boever here really showing that veterancy with regards to 9, where to put the car, and 9, how to frustrate Lemkins in that pass. But as they make the way on through, I can tell you that Paul Walton is now into the pits as well. Paul Walton in, and well, with that in mind, where is Paul Scott here, you ask? Well, Paul Scott right now making his way. I do believe he's coming through turn number 12. Walton is leaving the pit lane right now, and Paul Scott, his pit stop was, what was it, a 1 minute and 12, a pit time of 33.5 seconds. Paul Walton identical, and Walton comes on out. Oh, sorry, yeah, Walton comes on out here. He goes up to what is the pit limiter line, and he goes racing once again. And what I think Paul Scott has had a nightmare of an exit lap, in the fact he's just lost a lot of time here, and in fact the gap has opened up to 4 seconds. So Paul Scott has not been able to retain the lead of the class after the first round of pit stops. So it is now advantage Paul Walton as they make the way into the second stint. Well, whilst this has been happening, I can tell you that Sam Holman, after the pit stops, has re-emerged in P3 in the LMP AM class, with Stephan Wessels having completed his pit stop in P4, 21.5 seconds down. You can see Wessels here going past what is, I believe that is Sean Scudder. He's found his way past. Sean Scudder being P8 in the GT3, in the GT3 PRO class, as they roll on through. At P7 now, with Matthew Prouting in the pit lane. But as they come on through here, it is the case that Paul Walton has made that overcut, and Wessels, I think, now pushing on to hunt down Holman with Michael Price. Well, after his very long pit stop for Michael Price, in fact, a 1 minute 42, that means he's changed all 4 tyres in a single sitting. It is the case that Michael Price now trying to go to the end on the tyres, rather than having that pit stop later on when he takes the tyre change. I think we could expect a lot from Price here, and do not count him out. I think he could come back into that battle for P4 or P3. As he makes his way down towards turn number 5 in the infield, we look from Price up to, down to, I should say, what is the battle for P2 in the GT3 AM class. And well, Navarro, De Boever and James Slates once again out on the circuit, with Slates ahead of De Boever here, and it seems as though the two of them still battling for this position in earnest. Slates has the advantage, and they both seem to be very similar on pace right now. I think both of them have made some mistakes as well, which has contributed to both drivers being where they are, and Tristan De Boever being 25.5 seconds up the road. As you see there, Stephan Wessels coming between the two of them as he makes his way past what he would refer to as the GT3 traffic. Indeed, our LMP drivers would call it GT3 traffic, because they've got to navigate past it. They're not racing it. And as they make the way through turn number 12 here, well, can James Slates hold on to that advantage, as he now does have a 1.5 second advantage, with Navarro De Boever having to back off with Wessels coming on through. And as they make the way on towards another lap, we'll wait and see how this exactly plays out. But meanwhile, we're looking from one member of the De Boever family to another. I can tell you, whilst we've been looking away, it has finally happened. We do now have Peter Lemkins leading the GT3 Pro class. He found a way on through, and well, it was made in the run to turn 1, and Lemkins was able to get enough of an overspeed to get the move done before they got to the corner. And well, Lemkins now, as they make the way through turn number 6, will now have the horrible pressure of having to try and defend that lead versus a very fast and wise Mercedes behind him, as they make the way through the banking of turn number 7. Now, of course, one of the things here for both drivers is, of course, they've yet to pit, and therefore that will be a conundrum on their minds in terms of who pits first, they pit at the same time, who has the faster pit stop, etc. But I think one of the things that Lemkins now has to think about is how hard does he push the car to get that position off of Jeremy De Boever. If he's pushed it as much as I think he has, he will want to now try and calm it down. But the thing that De Boever can now do is simply sit in the draft and go, you know what, I'm not going to let you rest. I'm going to be right here, ever present, and a nuisance in your rear view mirror. Or does De Boever decide, you know what, I'm going to pull the car off now, I'm going to take it nice and easy. This this is approximately where we start to see those pit stops and hit into the pits. They both come, I believe. In fact, Peter Lemkins in and Jeremy De Boever in, and Lemkins coming in very, very late on indeed. I think he was trying to feint staying out and getting Jeremy De Boever to stay out, but they both coming in, and Dirt Bounce is now your race leader in the GT3 Pro class as they make their way down towards turn number 1. And, well, what can Bounce do? That is the big question as they roll them through turn number 1 and head up towards turn number 3. Well, the short answer is I think he's just got to keep his head down and get on with the job here, because he wasn't quite up with the 2 leaders, but I think going for the overcut, this could help him out depending on where his opponents come out. As we see Mark Baker, they're getting all sorts of run coming out of turn 3, and therefore having to lift off before coming back past Dirt Bounce into turn number 4. Now as they roll them through, we're also hearing down the pit lane, we do have our GT3 AM drivers, our GT3 AM leaders coming in. Tristan Dino Brega, James Slates also just passed through, and also Navarro De Boever in. Now we do believe that Dino Brega is going to hold on to the lead when he exits the pit lane, but we'll wait to see what happens between Slates and Dino Brega. Meanwhile, where is Arjun Kregel in all of this, I hear you ask? Well, he's currently P4, and he is peeling into the pits as well as the Dutchman as he makes his way in. But meanwhile, Lemkins versus De Boever. Lemkins has come out ahead of Jeremy De Boever, and look at the gap. It's pretty much the same as it previously was. The most that has been gained there is approximately a second by Lemkins by having a slightly faster pit stop. In fact, his pit stop was 1.4 seconds faster. Here's the case that RP Motorsport Pro got that pit stop done nice and tidy. There was a little bit of a delay for Jeremy De Boever, and now Lemkins will be pushing on. He's going to have to try and break that toe before De Boever can close back up and get in the slipstream. To break the toe, however, you need to be in a GT3 car somewhere. Oh, goodness me! And I was about to say, what would Lemkins need to do? That's the one thing he would not need to do, and that is to lose the car at turn number 5. And Peter Lemkins, as we see there, Liam Taylor on the snap on the brakes and flashing his lights. I think a little bit frustrated that Lemkins may have rejoined in what we call an unsafe manner. We didn't see the full picture, to be fair, but it is the case that Lemkins did not need a spin at turn 5, and that has cost him very dearly. That has cost him 8 seconds to Jeremy De Boever, and that could be what seals the difference between the two of them. We will wait and see later on. Keep in mind as well that Lucas Romano down in P5 here after having that very difficult start to the race will also be trying to get into the mix, and it is the case that Lucas Romano has had 1 pit stop already. He's got 1 more pit stop to go, at least on the schedule, and as he makes his way on around right now, we will wait and see how he gets back into the fight. As they roll on through here, it is the case that Dirt Bounce, meanwhile, our leader in the GT3 Pro class. Well, he was the leader before he came into the pits. DD blaming behind him P2. Jeremy De Boever here coming on through to complete another lap and take what will be, what will be the lead back as we understand it. In fact, here he comes and he retakes that lead. But as he makes his way on around, we do look back to the GT3 AM class to Tristan Dino Brega. And we can see here is the case that the Racing Team Master Blue driver now has Mark Sykes right after him here. And, well, Mark Sykes a little bit early on was quite a way behind Tristan Dino Brega. I'm wondering if it's a glitch on our timing screen, so I do not recall Mark Sykes making a pass. We will find out. In fact, Mark Sykes coming into the pits now. I was going to say, Mark Sykes, if he's managed to jump all that way up, he's got a pit stop to come at some point, surely. And there it is. Mark Sykes into the pits there, and as he brings the car, and he was one of the drivers I had the chance to catch up with briefly ahead of tonight's round. And the one thing he had to say to me very quickly is he was looking to keep it consistent tonight and stay out of trouble, albeit, he said in his own words, they are famous last words. Well, right now, it's looking pretty consistent after a rough start. Mark Sykes seems to be getting into the rhythm and starting to make his way up the GT3 AM class order, albeit that pit stop is going to drop him quite a way back, probably put him down towards P8, P9, once again behind Gutierrez. As James Slates pursues Navarro De Boever right now, they come up behind, well, they come up in amongst Sam Hollerton there. Or it's more, sorry, Sam Holman, I should say, for Hollerton Racer. It's more the case that the Hollerton Racing driver gets past them. He comes up behind them, and as they make their way out of turn 5 and to turn 6, it is the case that Slates continues that hot pursuit. But right now, you can see the gaps there on the timing tower on the left-hand side of your screen have started to open up a little bit, and we are, as a result, now going to see things settle down a little bit. Although, I say that, we look to our LMP2 AM class battle for the lead, and you can tell it's one of the battles that has not settled down. It's still very much in earnest here, with Paul Walton ahead of Paul Scott, and, well, Paul Scott has closed up over the last couple of laps by half a second a lap on average. But again, I think Walton may have a plan here as he goes a bit deep into turn 1. Well, I don't think that was part of the script as he made his way through 1 and into 2. I think that might have been a little bit of a heart in the mouth situation and just a brief mistake as nightfall descends on Daytona. The headlights are on, and as they make the way through 3 here, can Walton hold on to that lead? Now, as he makes his way out of 3 and heads up towards 5 here, what could be going through the minds of the two of them? Well, I definitely think that Paul Scott is pushing harder than Walton right now. I think what Paul Scott wants to do is try and get ahead and make that breakaway, or just be so close as to attach himself to the back of Walton and do the ultimate fuel saving that he can. Now, the problem is, of course, Scott's had to take a lot out of the car to close up that 4-second gap, albeit he does have a lot of pace. We see that Paul Walton deciding to use a lot more road than perhaps is necessary there on the exit of 6. I think that might get him a track limits for, and that'll be a few incident points going to his tally. But as they make their way down to the bus stop chicane here, Paul Scott definitely leveraging that pressure on Walton as we head towards the end of the first hour. We've still got quite a lot of time before the end of the first hour. And that shows you the gravitas of the racing here as the time presses on. And really, this is one of our closest battles on circuit. And of course, the battle for the lead in our class is always fantastic to see as Paul Scott builds up that momentum and goes hunting. And to give you an idea of how strong that slipstream is, as they make their way down towards turn 1, well, you can imagine as they emerge from the bus stop chicane, the gap was just under 9/10 of a second. And now, as they make their way up towards that timing line for the start-finish line and heading towards 1, you can see Paul Scott has already closed it up to less than 7/10 of a second, now 6/10, and that is where these Dallara P217 LMP2 machines gain so much in the draft. They gain a huge overspeed from it, and Paul Scott can close up drastically as a result as they roll on down into turn number 3 here. But we do look from them to what is the battle for, well, with the lead of the GT3 Pro class, I should say, and that is in the hands of Jeremy De Boever. In fact, we cut away from him briefly because I think Gareth Mills has had a bit of a spin. Now, where is that on circuit? That is at turn number 5 there, where the GM Racing driver has just got it a bit wrong, gone off circuit, I think under braking. I think the car snapped loose, and he's down in P7 in the GT3 AM class, but he's still at 2.3, 2.4 seconds off Lorenzo Gualtieri. And, well, Gareth Mills has been showing a lot of pace over the last couple of laps, and indeed since the start of the race. So I wouldn't count the GM Racing driver out of that hunt from the top 5 still, but he has made things a little bit harder for himself with that one error there, as he now brings himself back up to speed and gets himself settled back into a rhythm. And, well, in terms of drivers who are still making their way on around circuit, we can see a Liam Tack here down in what is P26 overall. That is P9 in the GT3 AM class. He's not had the happiest of races so far. It's gone a bit wrong for Liam Tack, but he's soldiering on 2 laps down from Mark Sykes there in P9 in the GT3 AM class. And I think the TGC Racing driver at this point just continuing to use this as an experience builder and looking to get some points in the books. You need to finish the race or be within 1 lap of the finish of the race to get the points, and Liam Tack will press on and continue to do so. There's no doubt about that as he makes his way down towards the bus stop chicane. Now, as he heads on down, we do look back up to James Slates in the class, P3 in the GT3 AM class. Slate's now trying to find his way past Matthew Prouting here, and to be fair, Matthew Prouting P4 in the GT3 Pro class. We can see Slate's flashing the lights there. I think a little bit of a, can you please get a move on or get out of the way, because I'm trying to come on through. And Slate's looking up the inside here of Prouting. He wants to hunt after Navarro De Boever. Now, as they make their way through the bus stop chicane, the problem is for Slates, of course, if he can't get clear track to go hunting after what is Navarro De Boever, can he expect that Matthew Prouting is going to come past Navarro De Boever? Well, Prouting has. In fact, Navarro De Boever has lost a lot of momentum coming out of the bus stop chicane here. I think he's made a bit of a mistake. You can see a flash of lights there from James Slates. Now, I'm wondering if that's a signal to say, look, I'm coming through, be ready or not, as they make their way up towards the timeline here. But Navarro De Boever definitely having a slow run. I think that might have been to let Prouting through. They are going to be side by side here as they make their way into 1, but Slates backs off a little bit and decides to tuck in. And I think Slates now trying to put the pressure on Navarro De Boever in terms of that fuel usage, and Slates wants to just simply tuck along for the ride here. They are 6 seconds off of their leader, and that is Tristan De Boever in the class. It is the case the Racing Team Astra Blue driver just a little bit further up the road, but they're more focused, I think, on this battle for P2 right now. And as they make their way up towards turn 5, I wonder if Slates is trying to turn the focus on the hunt for the leader and whether they can potentially catch up to De Boever and make it into a three-way fight for the lead at this critical juncture of the race as they make their way on down into turn number 5. As they come through, we do look up to Paul Walton here, who is looking very comfortable in the lead of the LMP2 AM class right now. He does have almost a 3-second gap over Paul Scott, who's chasing him. Paul Scott on that last lap has had a bit of a dismal lap, a 37.3 versus Paul Walton on a 35.6. I think Scott may have caught some traffic or made a brief error, and that has cost him dearly, but he's still got plenty of time to go in this race to try and catch back up. As we've also heard that Gareth Mills in the GT3 AM class is now in P7 after passing Mark Sykes who had to make a pit stop. But right now, as Paul Scott looks to hunt down Paul Walton, we'll wait and see how the tables will turn between the two of them, albeit they've got a lot of distance still to go, as we still are in that first hour of the 2 hours here at Daytona. You can see Sean Scooter there trying to get on the power, and the GT3 driver stays low to let Paul Scott go around the outside. And speaking of Sean Scooter, we haven't really talked too much about the South African driver from Racing Team Astra Blue since the start of this race. Again, down in P8 at the moment, the last of our runners in the GT3 Pro class, and well, it just has not worked out for Scooter over the last couple of rounds at Mosport. It really was a difficult day, albeit in a diminished field. He was able to pick up some good points, but Scooter really just, I think, trying to find that rhythm and that pace at the moment. To be fair, a very strong driver, but still a lot of learning indeed for all of our drivers that you can always learn as a driver, whether you're a real world driver or a sim racing driver. Every day is a learning experience, and I think Scooter right now, a lot of information going in with regards to where he can improve that lap time. And to be fair, he's lapping faster than Davide Favo, who is up the road from him, the GT3 AM driver. But looking more within his own class, he's lapping faster than Gus Franken. In fact, that last lap, he did take the best part of a second out of Gus Franken. But beyond that, everybody else seems to be matching him for pace in the class, if not going a little bit faster as they make their way on around and down into turn number 1. Now as they come through the corner here, Sean Scooter pressing on. We do look to what is our GT3 AM class, and particularly to Lorenzo Galtieri. As we can see here, it is the case that the Racing Team Astra Orange driver, after being in a couple of incidents by himself and also with other drivers earlier on, as we're to understand it is the case that the 911 driver here not having the race that he would want perhaps, and he is 7 seconds off Arjen Kregel right now, hunting down P5 in the GT3 AM class in the Lamborghini Huracan. And we know Galtieri has got a lot of pace. He has got a colossal amount of pace, but the challenge for him is, simply put, he needs to find a way to get back into that fight for the top 5, and I think as time goes on here he may be able to. And for him, that last lap he took a whole 1.5 seconds out of Arjen Kregel. He's got the pace to do so, and meanwhile, oh goodness me, well, we had to cut away briefly from Galtieri because one of his rivals in the championship, Navarro De Boever, where is that, I hear you ask? That is down at the bus stop chicane, and then a change by DB2 driver having a spin there, and James States is through. Now I don't think there's been any contact. I think Navarro De Boever just got it wrong, and to be fair, it's quite easy to get it wrong at the bus stop chicane given the weight transfer and also the amount of curve that our drivers use to get the best possible line. But Navarro De Boever now down to P3, and James Slates back up into that second place position as the camera pans to him. And right now the RP Mosport Pro Am driver, I think, will have a brief smile on his face for a moment, for the simple reason he can now try to focus on breaking away from Navarro De Boever and hunting down Tristan Di Nobrega. We'll have to wait and see, however, where he's able to fashion that into reality, as we say hello in the Facebook chat there to Craig Pearce. As our drivers continue to make their way on around here, it is the case that we look from them up to what is our LMP2 AM class once again, and we focus the picture on Richard Stanton here, who in P6 has had a difficult race so far and is trying to find a way to really get back into the hunt for the top 5. He's 22 seconds off of Michael Price right now, and I think Stanton, after those earlier incidents, has now got it all to do. But to be fair, there's a lot of time left and anything can happen before the end of this race. The only conundrum here that we really need to factor in is the fact that the P5 driver in the LMP2 AM class, Michael Price, the Excite Racing driver, who you can see now, he has already done his tyre change in the pit stops. He has already made the switch, and therefore that's why his pit stop, his first one, was 30 seconds longer than everybody else's in the class on average. And now Michael Price, of course, will be looking to use that fresher tyre in order to try and build up the pace and close the gap to the leaders over the course of this stint. Of course, it will come back to haunt him in the final stint, where his tyres will be old by comparison with the much fresher tyres of all of his rivals. It swings and roundabouts, and right now Michael Price is on the swing, but he'll find himself on the roundabout in that final stint. As they roll them through and around, we do look from Michael Price to Stephan Wessels, who is the driver ahead of him in P4 in the LMP2 class, and it is the case that Wessels right now 18 seconds off of Holman. And to be fair, Wessels, that last lap not closing to Holman. In fact, he lost another second to Holman. I think there was a little bit of traffic for Wessels, to be fair, but he is putting away from Price, Stanton, Wyborn, Collins, and Mark Baker, in fact, is flying, but he is a lap down. And speaking of Mark Baker, well, he's got something wrong there as he makes swaps back up to speed, and that is on the low run out of turn number 6 to 7 on the bank in there. And I think Mark Baker for Team Tetra Rouge has not had a day he wants to remember here at the Daytona circuit. It has not worked out for the Team Tetra Rouge driver as he builds the pace up, and he's down in that P9 position right now, and he is effectively half a lap down on Jonathan Collins, who is 47 seconds up the road from him as they make the way on through. But as he heads around, it is the case we look from Mark Baker to a driver in the GT3 AM class who's having a good race it so far, and that is Tristan Dino Brega here, the Racing Team Astra Blue driver, who continues to soldier on, and as he makes his way down the back straight in towards the bus stop chicane, his advantage 12.2 seconds, and as Jack Wyborn comes up behind him here and plays the patience game, will be going past when they make the way out of the bus stop and onto the turn 12 banking. It is the case that Dino Brega right now currently lapping considerably faster than his opponents. On average, it is the case that Dino Brega lapping in the high 46s, whereas James Slates and Navarro De Boever lapping in what is the high 46s to low 47s, albeit in that last lap Navarro De Boever was able to match Dino Brega, but it is the case that right now the South African here does seem to have that edge over his opponents, and he's making it work as he heads around and down towards turn at number 1. He goes on to what for him is lap number 33. As he heads into the braking zone there, we do look to Mark Sykes in the same class here, who after his second pit stop, and remember Mark Sykes had to take an early pit stop due to damage on the car, we saw that, it was the case he had to make that early stop. Right now it is the case the NXTGEN Racing with Sam Case's UK driver trying to hunt after Gareth Mills, but he does have a 30-second gap to close down. It's a long way to go in order to be able to close up to him, and well, he could potentially do it. Of course, we do have that concern around the tyre change, and we believe that Mark Sykes has already made his tyre change, so that will be something to plan. In fact, Gareth Mills has also made his tyre change in the pits, so I think it's the case actually the gap will be neutralised there. It'll be to Lorenzo Gualtieri, who is a further 8.5 seconds, 9 seconds in fact, up the road from Gareth Mills, that they'll both be hunting down. As they head charging on down and around the circuit, we look back up towards our leader in the LMP2 AM class, and that is Paul Walton here for RD Simsport, who as he makes his way on through this time, heading down towards the bus stop chicane, the gap between himself and Paul Scott is closing up a little bit again. It closed up by half a second that previous lap, albeit both drivers have had to start navigating another portion of GT3 traffic to be fair, but Walton, I think as well, may be thinking about, does he start to lift it off a little bit? Does he start to do a bit of lift and coast into corners in order to be able to try and avoid effectively using excessive fuel here? And that is one technique our drivers can do. We've seen it time and time again where they lift off the throttle approximately about 50 to 100 metres before a braking zone in order just to save a little bit of fuel. They let the car coast into the corner as they made their way around the circuit, and it's called lift and coasting formally. That's what it's described as in the world of motorsport, and Paul Walton may be doing that to an extent just to help extend the fuel tank. That will mean, of course, if Paul Scott is pushing, you can see Paul Scott there in the rear of the cameras. Hold up, who's that turned at turn number 1? I think that's Sean Scudder, who's just getting himself back up to speed. It is indeed. And what's happened to Michael Price? Well, he's got a massive gash out the left-hand side of the car. We're hearing that Mark Baker's had an incident quite close by, and I think the two of them have come to blows, and Michael Price is parking up there, and that is going to be a jump to the pit. And well, with Michael Price jumping to that pit, that will put him all the way down to P8, or P9 in fact, as Mark Baker will come up to P8. Now, I'm not sure if there was contact between the two, or they both just got it wrong at what was the run out. It's out of turn 6, in fact, not at the bus stop. It's turn 6 where the contact has happened, it would seem, or the incident has happened, we should say. And Mark Baker right now pressing on. He's gained a place, and Jack Wyborn in the pits currently. And as they make their way on around here, well, it's added complexity to the LMP2 AM class as we look into the Twitch chat and say hello to Craig Pierce1 there, and good to see you popping over from Facebook to the Twitch chat, Craig. Hope you're doing well. Mark Baker into the pits now. Will this involve a repair? I think there may be some repair work to the car. Given the gash taken out the side of Michael Price's left-hand side aeropod, I think Mark Baker may have some pieces of Michael Price's Excite racing machine lodged in his own Team Tetra Rouge vehicle. I'm just guessing at that. I don't know for definite, but right now it is the case as they come on in. Well, we look to one driver who has been in the wars as well, and that's Lorenzo Gualtieri here, the Racing Team Astra Orange driver, who has closed up to the back of Arjen Kregel, and as they make their way through turn number 5 here in the infield section, we ride on board the gearbox of the Ferrari driver from Team Racing Netherlands, who know he's now got the pressure of the driver behind him, and that will be building somewhat as they roll on out to turn 6 and head up onto the banking. Now, of course, one of the challenges here for Kregel is the fact that Ferrari does not have the top end speed unless it's in the draft, and he will have the gear ratios, but he doesn't quite have it in 6th gear in particular, and so we will see Gualtieri start to close up very shortly as they make the way down towards the bus stop chicane. It's not the longest of runs compared to the run out of the chicane all the way to turn 1. You can see Gregor here doing a bit of coasting. In fact, he makes his way to the point. You can hear it, they're just lifting off the throttle gently in order to save some fuel. And now Gregor will have Gualtieri right behind him as they make the way out. And in fact, Gualtieri goes on the low line and simply says, you know what, I'm going to come through low. And Gregor now, I think, lifting off and just wanting to tuck in behind. Now, when will he pull the car back down? There he goes. He's pulled the car down and he will tuck into the slipstream here with Gualtieri. I think Gregor playing the smart game here. He drops to P6, but will he try and come back at Gualtieri into turn number 1? Where he's all there right on the rear end of the Lamborghini driver. As they make the way across the timeline here and head on to another lap. Will he look to inside? No, he has to look to the outside in the end. In fact, he has to back off very heavily under braking. Now, I think Krell just not able to find a way to get the move back on Gualtieri and instead having to play the safe option of just braking early and staying behind. So it is the case that Lorenzo Gualtieri up into P5 in the GT3 AM class as they make their way through turn number 3. As they roll them through the right-hander here and head through the infield section once again, we look from them to what is a bit further up in their order and to our P4 driver, Davide Favo here, who is 7.5 seconds ahead of his teammate Gualtieri in that P4 position. And the Racing Team Astra Orange driver, bar one mistake earlier in the race, we had a bit of an off. He's actually had quite a quiet race here, and a B-Fair one to be proud of so far. Currently running in P4, 22 seconds off in Navarro De Boever, but the thing for Favo is the case that he's been showing good pace, not quite on the pace of the top 3 in the class, but definitely pace there to be in the top 5, albeit Gualtieri by comparison has been showing pace which is on average about 5 to 6 tenths of a second a lap faster. Gualtieri in that last lap was a whole second faster, but we can attribute some of the draft to that. You can see, in fact, in the rear of the picture there, we do have Gualtieri coming on through, but Davide Favo, the focus of our camera shot, as he makes his way through the bus stop chicane, and the light they're reflecting off a Lamborghini. Absolutely lovely to see these cars racing around at night in the arena, and as they make the way through under the spotlights, of course, it is the case that Favo pushing on. But as he makes his way around, we hear into the pits. Another Racing Team Astra driver of Stephan Wessels making his second stop, and really the first of our leading LMP2 AM class drivers to pull the trigger on the second stop here. Now, what is Wessels planning? That is the question. And will we see a reaction from Sam Holman, who is in P3 and is effectively under threat from Wessels in terms of that battle for the final spot on the podium? Well, I think the Hollerton Racing driver here, he does have to change tyres in the pits. We are keeping an eye on our timing boards for those tyre change pit stops. The majority of our drivers will need to make tyre changes. It's the case that the vast majority opted to just take on fuel earlier on in their first pit stop and go for the tyre change later on, which is understandable. They want fresh tyres towards the end of the race where the car's actually a bit lighter, apart from the LMP drivers who have to fill the fuel tank up to full and then go racing it once again. But Holman here pressing on. Wessels has come out of the pits. Richard Stanton is ahead of him, as we can see here. Stanton already through turn number 3. Where does Wessels come out, I hear you ask? Well, he's come out, coming out of the pit lane now. So he's coming out in P5, and he's got Jonathan Collins making his way into turn 1. So he's going to skip Collins, and I think it will be a P5 for Stephan Wessels as they make the way back up to speed. And Collins here pressing on the privateer. He's a little bit further down from Wessels at this point in time. But as he comes into turn number 3 right now, Jonathan Collins, well, what we've got to say about his race, which has been a bit of a difficult one in the opening hour. A couple of mistakes and or incidents have seen him drop down the order, but he's keeping in there. And to be fair, Collins putting in the lap times right now. And in fact, able to match the pace of the likes of Richard Stanton and also Mark Baker. In fact, a bit faster than the pair of them by half a second that last lap. So don't count Jonathan Collins out with an opportunity to try and creep his way into the top 5 if he carries up this momentum for the rest of the race. But we'll have to wait and see how it will work out in practice. He does have quite a gap to close down to Richard Stanton. At the moment, that gap sitting at 30 seconds. But as he rolls them through, we do look back up to the leaders of the LMP2 AM class, and it is Paul Walton here, who is absolutely on a charge, of course, as we said previously. But the problem for Walton is it does seem as though Paul Scott is getting the measure of him, and on that last lap, Paul Scott was able to take half a second out of him. This time around, Paul Walton a 34.9, Paul Scott a 34.8. They are matching one another. They're both trying to capitalise on the traffic in order to gain as much time on the straights, and they do have now Richard Stanton between the two of them. Of course, Stanton a lap down at this point in the race on the 2 leaders in the LMP2 class. That shows you how fast the pair of them are going, and Stanton given the space there to Scott to come through the turn 3 hairpin. It won't cost Scott too much time, although he was a little bit cautious there. You could see through turning into turn 3, just in case Stanton did come in a bit tight to the apex, but great respect shown there, great awareness of the blue flags from Richard Stanton. And now as they make the way down to turn 5 here, Paul Scott soldiers on, albeit he's lost a couple of attempts from that, but he will not mind that. That's just part of the racing as they make the way out of the the infield and back up onto the oval banking. But right now, Paul Scott definitely trying to deploy the pace. As we hear that Jack Wyborn has come into the pits, he's had to jump to the pits after an off track, and now I think that is Jack Wyborn. I am hearing they are starting to retire the car. Jack Wyborn has retired from the LMP2 class, and that will be a P9 registered in the books, but I don't think there'll be any points to that, unfortunately, for Wyborn today. It has not been his race, so he adds to our list of retirements. We now have 3 retirements in the form of Chris Keenan, Kurt Van Hoenacker, both of them in the GT3 AM class, and also Jack Wyborn. But as our drivers continue their way on around, we can see it's one of those situations where Walton again having to find his way past traffic, as is Paul Scott, and Walton having the traffic come favourably to him. At this time, it is worth looking further down the order, particularly to our GT3 AM class, of the story of that P2 battle. And well, James Slates right now in P2, got to P2, held it for a brief while, then Navarro De Boever came on through, and then it was the case that both drivers dropped it at respective intervals, but Navarro De Boever's had the bigger mistake of the two of them, and James Slates now, well, it is the case that the Audi driver has got a 4-second advantage, but Navarro De Boever is closing on him by half a second a lap on average. So it is Navarro De Boever who is gradually building that momentum. The gap, when we last looked at it, to be fair, was 8 seconds. That was about 7 minutes ago. The gap is now down to 4 seconds. It's been halved, and that shows you Navarro De Boever is pushing to try and close this gap on down. As we talk about one De Boever, we look to the other member of the De Boever family racing this series, and that is Jeremy De Boever, the leader of the GT3 PRO class, and he right now holds an advantage of just shy of 6 seconds over Peter Lempkins here. And Jeremy De Boever, of course, doing everything he can to make it a win here today as he rolls them through the corners. But the thing for Jeremy De Boever, as he makes his way down towards turn number 5, where you can see that is Collins coming on through. He won't mind that. Collins using the aero package on the Dallara LMP2 machine to go round the outside into turn 4, and Jeremy De Boever just carrying on his merry way. He'll be conscious of the fact that Peter Lempkins is not far enough away to give him the overall safety, although 5 seconds is a sizable margin. 5.5 seconds as it stands, but it's not a comfortable margin. 10 seconds would be much more comfortable, but I'm sure Jeremy De Boever does have a plan, and right now he is lapping slightly faster than Peter Lempkins on average, to be fair. But as we do reach the end of what is the 70-minute mark, so 1 hour and 10 minutes, we're just heading up towards that mark right now. We're going to give you a quick summary of how things currently stand across the classes and the story over the opening hour or so. So look into the LMP2 AM class. Really, the story has been a battle between Paul Walton and Paul Scott, whereby Paul Walton took the lead of this race and he started at the front of the field. Paul Scott was close alongside him, and well, the two of them have exchanged places, but after the first pit stop, Paul Walton got the job done to get back out ahead based on the overcut, and we do believe that Paul Scott is pushing a bit harder than Paul Walton and using a bit more fuel up in the process, and that may come back to hurt him later on. But the two of them have been exchanging lap time as if they're exchanging stocks on the stock market on Wall Street, in the fact that 1 minute Paul Walton will deliver an absolutely brilliant lap, and then Paul Scott will respond, and then Walton will respond to him. But it seems as though Scott is being made to push a little bit harder and is having to use more of the car in the process. Behind them, really the best of the rest right now, is Sam Holman from Hollerton Racing in P3, who's had a very quiet race, but he's holding on to that P3 position. No mistakes or no major errors to count on, and the Briton right now has to be conscious of the fact that he is due that second stop at some point, and well, in that second stop position right now, it's not Richard Stanton who's in P4, and Stanton is pressing on all the same, albeit his race has seen a couple of mistakes which have cost him a bit dearly when he was potentially hunting after what was a chance at a top 3. But right now he's looking to try and finish in that top 5, as we hear that Tristan Dina Brigger set the fastest lap in the GT3 AM class of 44.8. We'll come to him in a brief while. But the man to watch out for in the LMP2 AM class, the best of the rest, and really hunting that third spot on the podium, is Stephan Wessels right now, the Racing Team Astra Blue driver, who hadn't been involved in a couple of instances, really settled himself back down. He's made his second stop as well. He is the first of our main leading drivers in the LMP2 AM class to make their second stop, and now he is trying to push all the way to the conclusion as he makes his way down the turn 12 banking and down towards another lap. And we see there, just out of camera shot, Davide Fava and Lorenzo Gualtieri, the two Racing Team Astra Orange drivers, changing places. They make their way on to another lap. Jonathan Collins in P6 in the LMP2 AM class, meanwhile, is the case. Some early moments have cost him dearly, but at the same time, having made one stop, he's got another stop on the agenda, and he'll be looking to try and get some all-important points come the end of this one. And Michael Price has made his second stop, but it was a very long pit stop for Michael Price, and we do believe there was some damage to the car. In fact, there was. He had to be towed to the pits. He jumped to the pits due to contact with, we believe, Mark Baker at the bus stop chicane, or the two of them had some sort of coming together, or they both have incidents at the same time. But but Michael Price in the end having to jump to the pits, and that's cost him dearly what was a potential top 5 finish here, currently in P7. And it's Mark Baker, the last of our LMP2 runners out on circuit, the Team Tech Rouge driver, who after a difficult start is trying to get himself back into this race, and it's hunting after Michael Price. But Mark Baker in P8 having made 2 stops as well. And the retirement we've had in the LMP2 AM class is Jack Wyborn, who retired 4 laps ago. Meanwhile, in the GT3 Pro class, it is the story of Jeremy De Boever, who is leading at this point in time. 5 seconds ahead of Peter Lemkins as they make their way down towards turn number 5. And Jeremy De Boever feeling quite comfortable, but there has been a long back and forth race between the two of them, to be fair. And that sounds a little bit contradictory. He's currently comfortable because he has a 5-second advantage over Peter Lemkins. But after the first round of pit stops, it was the case that Peter Lemkins was the leader of the two until he dropped it at turn 5, got it wrong, and lost out an 8-second disadvantage versus Jeremy De Boever. But since then, Peter Lemkins has been pushing as much as he possibly can. I think Jeremy De Boever is also managing that gap to an extent, and that really tells the story with Peter Lemkins right now in P2 doing everything he can to come back. Both of them have yet to take their second stop. Indeed, nobody out of our front runners in the GT3 Pro class, indeed nobody in our GT3 Pro class as far as I can see, has made their second scheduled stop as Peter Lemkins comes past Gareth Mills there, and as he makes his way into the bus stop chicane, he's pushing hard after De Boever, as is Lucas Romano, who had a difficult start to the race, dropped all the way to the back of the GT3 Pro class, but has found his way back up to P3. He is currently 19 seconds off a second place man Peter Lemkins, his teammate, but the RP Mosport Pro Am driver of Lucas Romano right now pressing on. He's still got another stop to go, but he is showing matching pace to the two leaders in class. And then we have Matthew Prouting in P4, who was looking to be a contender for the potential lead until a very critical mistake cost him dearly, and now he's in P4. He's chasing after Lucas Romano, and well, Matthew Prouting is the fastest of anybody in the GT3 Pro class right now by over what was a second versus Jeremy De Boever last time out, the leader in the class. And Matthew Prouting, he's not matching the fastest, he's going at least 1 to 2 tenths faster than Peter Lemkins and Lucas Romano, and that shows you how much Prouting is pushing to try and get himself back onto the podium here in the Eclipse Racing BMW M4. Meanwhile, in P5, completing the top 5 in their class is Dirt Bounce, the RP Motorsport senior driver, who involved in the fighting earlier on has dropped backwards to a degree. I think Bounce had a couple of off tracks which have hurt him, and now he is soldiering on in P5 here. But also we do have to keep in mind that Dirt Bounce did take a tyre change when he came to the pits the first time round. He is the lead driver who took the tyre change in the pit stop in that window. And meanwhile, we can see DDD Blaming from P6 who also decided to change tyres, and Gus Franken as well. And really the story of them both is they both had difficulty in finding that momentum today, as we see Gus Franken here down in P7. And I believe Gus Franken has had some technical difficulties with the car as well. I think some damage was picked up a little bit earlier on as he makes his way down towards the start-finish line to go onto another lap. And then we have Sean Scudder, last but not least in the GT3 Pro class, who really has not had a positive day here. And I think he's just trying to get the car home to get some points. There's been a number of moments, particularly at turn 1, which has caught him out, and those moments have cost him very dearly. He's running almost 1.5 minutes off of Gus Franken, who's in P7. Now, we will come to tell you the story about the GT3 AM class very shortly, but I've just had it whispered in my ear that Paul Scott has come into the pits from what was P2 in the LMP2 AM class. So we are now in that second pit stop window for the LMP2 drivers, particularly the leaders. And with Paul Scott in to take that tyre change, it's now Sam Holman who makes his way in P2 through the infield. Now, we're not expecting Holman to get involved in that battle for the lead. He's not close enough to really affect it now. Paul Scott's coming out the pit lane. He will emerge ahead of Richard Stanton, as we're to understand, because Richard Stanton's up at the bus stop right now. So it is the case the top 3 are well clear of the rest of their field. But the point is here is the case that now it will all fall to Paul Walton. He's got to nail this overcut once again as he makes his way into turn 1. Now he will know that Paul Scott has pitted, and what I think Walton has banked on here, oh goodness me, as we see there, that's Lucas Romano who's just got it briefly wrong at turn 1, and Will Walton just managing to get through there at a moment's notice. And if anybody recalls what happened at Mosport last time out, where it was the case that Lucas Romano, as he made his way through the opening corner at the Canadian circuit, he found an LMP2 car across the circuit, which he came into no, my apologies, that's a different driver entirely, but he did make contact with an LMP2 car into turn 2, which cost him the potential win in the class. Well, that could happen to Paul Walton in terms of that contact there. Thankfully it didn't, and Walton able to navigate it, and Lucas Romano doing everything he can to try and stay out the way. But coming into the pits now is Sam Holman here from P2. We've also got Richard Stanton and Jonathan Collins into the pits. So right now it's the case they're all coming in, and as they make the way in, well, Paul Walton stays on out, and I think this is to try and do the ultimate overcut, which is to go for the 2-stop and do it by a comfortable margin. We will wait and see how they all emerge, but Walton right now not showing any signs of pitting, or if he's going to, it may be at the end of this lap, and that gives us a good moment to take a quick sip of water. As he rolls through the bus stop here, and Be There looking very in control of the car, but again, Paul Scott on his outlap will wait to see what his lap time is once he registers his first full lap after his outlap. Well, it was an outlap of what was a 2:45.65. Now, does Walton peel on in this time? No, he stays on 8. He's going much longer compared to his contemporaries. I do think that Paul Walton has really saved a lot of fuel in this race. I think he has gone all in order to try and save fuel, and it might work a treat now because he can go longer and he doesn't have to worry about having an extended pit stop. Alternatively, he can push a bit harder on that final stint as Sam Holman comes out the pit lane, and well, he will emerge quite comfortably, I do believe, in P3 as he makes his way around. And where is Stephan Wessels to chase him? As Sam Holman comes on out, well, Wessels, by comparison, is in P4 here, and the best part of approximately 17 seconds down the road as he makes his way through turn number 2 here. In fact, the gap's a little bit less now. Our timing screen's been updated. It's 16 seconds, and Wessels has got it all to do over the remainder of this race. Now, the LMP2 drivers have made their pit stops. Richard Stanton coming out in P5, Jonathan Collins P6. We need to tell you the story of the GT3 AM class before they make their second round of pit stops. Now, the story has been at the front of the GT3 AM field. We've got Tristan Dino Brega here from Racing Team Astra Blue, who has been leading quite comfortably since the early stages of this race. It's a case that he did have that contention with James Slates and Navarro De Boever. They were hunting after him, but in the end, Dino Brega was able to break away with Slates and De Boever battling one another. And now the Ferrari driver here for Racing Team Astra Blue holds an advantage of 21.5 seconds over James Slates. He's comfortably leading, and I think this one is going his way. He's also already made his pit stop to change tyres, so he's going to have a shorter second stop. Meanwhile, in P2, it's James Slates here, who in the Audi R8 has had a back-and-forth battle with Navarro De Boever. Both drivers have had multiple errors on circuit and incidents by themselves and also with other drivers, but really it has been James Slates who's had the lesser of the incidents, and he is leading right now. They are equal on pace, however, and Navarro De Boever down in P3, trying to hunt after him and stay on that podium and get that second spot rather than the third spot. They, in turn, are 26.5 seconds clear of P4 driver Lorenzo Gualtieri, who really should be up there with them if it were not for a number of moments and incidents and mistakes. And the Racing Team Astra Orange driver will know that, and he'll be kicking himself right now for the fact he should be right up there battling for the podium, but instead he finds he's in P4, 26, almost 27 seconds down on P3 as he makes his way down the back straight here and comes on past will be Gus Frank, and he's going to be going past the GT3 PRO driver going up the inside as they make their way into the bus stop here, and we're making it very clear he wants to come on through. And then we do have Ian at P5 in the class, Davide Favo, who really, he's run a very consistent race. One mistake earlier on saw him drop down the order to an extent, but the Racing Team Astra Orange driver has been in a quiet race, and he's definitely on course for a top 5 finish. Adrian Kregel P6, a very similar situation. He's just not quite had the pace compared to his peers, but it is the case the Team Racing Netherlands driver has not really made any mistakes. He's just not quite had the pace to be up there battling for the top 5, but P6 I think will do him very nicely here today, with Gareth Mills in P7 with a couple of mistakes midway through the race around the 50-minute mark, costing him dearly, albeit returning to the series as of tonight. And it's good to see the GM racing machine out in full force in the capable hands of the South African driver. And then we do have Mark Sykes here in P8, the next gen racing with Sam Case's UK driver, who after a difficult start to the race having to make an extra pit stop due to damage picked up on the opening 2 laps. It is the case right now. He's pressing on and trying to chase after Gareth Mills. The gap between the two of them, 24 seconds, and gradually closing in the favour of Mark Sykes as we hear that Gareth Mills is into the pit lane. And it's Liam Tack, the last of our runners in the GT3 AM class, down in P9, 3 laps off of Mark Sykes. He's just not had a race which has worked out, but he's staying in there. It's great to see. He's pressing on to bring home the result. We also had 2 retirements in the GT3 AM class. Chris Keenan, who retired 29 laps ago, and Kurt Van Hoenacker, who retired 31 laps ago. So both retiring within that first hour of the race, and it is the case that Chris Keenan, I think, with an incident, some technical issues on the car, and it's the case they were not able to get it back out. And Van Hoenacker involved in an incident with another driver, and as a result of the damage picked up, they tried to repair the car, but in the end they have had to retire the car. So we started with 28 drivers, we're now down to 25, but we've still got just shy of 40 minutes of racing to go, just under 40 minutes, and well, this race is building up to its finale. And speaking of its finale, Paul Walton into the pits for his tyre change. It is the case, his second scheduled stop and potentially his final one. He went an extra 4 laps compared to his rival Paul Scott. Where is Paul Scott? He's making his way right now through the turn 12 banking, and as he comes onto the flat here and heads to the start-finish line, Walton has just left his pit box, and where is Walton in comparison? He's making his way out of the pit lane here, and as he comes on out, where is Paul Scott? There he is in the rear of the picture, but I think it's going to be the case that Walton is going to be safe, as the camera will pan down shortly and give us perspective, but as he makes his way on through, there is Paul Scott, and Paul Walton comes back out ahead of Paul Scott by a small margin. It's only 0.6 of a second, but it's enough. Paul Scott gave it everything in order to try and undercut Paul Walton, but Walton has gained the upper hand. Now, of course, the challenge will be Walton has to turn those tyres on. He's got to get them up to temperature over the next lap or so. He's got to do it quickly, because whilst they're just out of the temperature window, Paul Scott will have an advantage, but can Paul Scott find a way? We're right on board here with the NXTGEN Racing driver as he gives pursuit to the RD Simsport driver ahead, and you can see that Walton goes wide. That's the tyre temperatures affecting him, and that will be a track limits violation, but I think he's got enough incident points to not have to worry about driving penalty this time. But he can't afford to keep doing that, and as they make the way through turn number 7 here, you can see Paul Scott very in earnest, closing up as they make the way down towards the bus stop chicane here, building that momentum. He looks to the inside, he dares to dream, but he doesn't go for it, and I think Paul Scott thinking, no, I'm going to save it for the run out of the bus stop and through turn number 12, and as they make the way now after the turn 12 banking here, you can see Paul Scott had to lift out quite heavily due to the dirty air of the Walton in front of him, but now only 4.5 tenths. Well, once they get into 6th gear, this is where he will close very rapidly, because they hit the overspeed here with the slipstream, and you can see that's Liam Tack staying high to the right. He doesn't want to get involved in this as they make the way across that timing line now. Paul Walton stays high, and in fact he lifts off here, and Walton decides to let Paul Scott go as they make the way into the corner. Now Walton, will he be trying to cut back here? No, I think Walton playing it safe, and Walton's definitely got an ace up his sleeve that he's not showing. And the only thing I can think it is, he is not making that third stop. He is expected to only have to make 2 stops, and I think Paul Scott may have to make a third stop at the rate he's pushing right now. We will see what happens here, but Paul Walton giving up the position like that, well, Walton is not one just to yield. He will battle if he wants to win. I think Walton is banking. Oh, goodness me! And there's contact there with Sean Scooter as Walton was trying to come on through. Now, I think the judge will take a look at that one afterwards. I think in the mind of Walton, he would argue that he was well placed on the inside to find his way past both of the GT3 drivers. I think Scooter would argue that he had the right to turn in because Walton wasn't down the inside, but that's not what Walton needs, not now, and that has cost him dearly. He's now dropped the best part of 3.5 to 4 seconds off of Paul Scott as they make the way down onto the back straight, but Walton there in a bit of a moment which could hurt him in the longer term here after the race results are declared as he makes his way down towards the bus stop chicane. Of course, we won't know about that until next week when it's the case when we go to round number 5 in 2 weeks time, but Walton right now, I think will be thinking to himself that didn't need to happen, and as they make the way through turn number 12, and I'm not appropriating blame anywhere, it is the case, you can see it from both sides. Right now Paul Scott has been given a lifeline, and that lifeline is that his opponent has just lost a lot of time and may have some damage on the car that could hurt him in the long run. As they make the way down the round here and onto another lap now, Paul Scott finds himself behind some of the GT3 traffic. That's Navarro, De Boever and De Boever, both P3 in the respective GT3 classes as they make the way through turn 2 and up into 3. And now Paul Scott will try to navigate them both at the same time. Scott goes up the inside there of Navarro, De Boever. He can't find the space on De Boever. And as they make the way out of the corner here, well, Paul Scott's going to safely make his way through now. I think Paul Scott has got to be wary of the fact that Walton will be coming at him very quickly once he gets himself back up to speed after that moment. Richard Stanton in the pits. And I believe Richard Stanton's had a moment only months ago. In fact, I can see a lot of damage on what, from the driver's perspective, is the front right side of the car. That bumper has been very heavily scraped. I'm wondering if he's been involved in an incident somewhere out on circuit. In fact, we're hearing that he has had a moment, and we're not sure what exactly has happened, but that does promote Jonathan Collins up into P5 here, and the privateer, well, it's coming back his way, and I think he will be very pleased to hear that the results are heading his way now as he makes his way up towards turn number 3. And well, for the number 19 driver, it's the case that patience and perseverance does pay off as Richard Stanton's come into the pits and immediately come out. He's used his fast repair, and it's the case that Stanton's had to do repair work to the car. But as Collins presses on here, it's Stephan Wessels who's up the road from him, and well, it's Wessels who's a lap ahead, and it shows you the top 4 are an entire lap ahead of the rest of the LMP class, and that's just the pace they've been deploying in the instance that have occurred for respective drivers. And Wessels still chasing down Sam Holman with what is the best part of 30 3 minutes to go, and that gap has come down to 9 seconds. And can Holman hold on? That'll be the big question, of course. Are we expecting everybody to be doing a third stop in the LMP class? That will be the challenge as well. That'll be on their minds. As into the pits now from the lead of the GT3 AM class is Tristan De Boever, and we can also see here coming in James Slates and also Jeremy De Boever. They both coming in from the top 3 at the GT3 AM class, and that is that continued sequence of pit stops as Tristan De Boever emerges from the pit lane here. That is his second and final stop on the schedule done, and now he'll be looking to try and bring this one home. It should be a straightforward cruise to the finish, albeit it is going to be a 33-minute cruise plus the final lap. And for the Racing Team Astra Blue driver, he'll be hoping that time flies by. He won't want to think about the time, he'll just want to think about getting that car home. As meanwhile, we can see here coming on through, that is Davide Varvo making his way at the inside of Jeremy De Boever, and De Boever comes on back through as they run through the corners here. And well, Jeremy De Boever, after making his second stop, he's got Peter Lemkins right behind him here. So in the pit window, we didn't see this in terms of when they came in, but we can confirm it. Jeremy De Boever has been closed up to by Peter Lemkins, despite Lemkins being quite a way back. The gap between the two of them when we last checked was in the region of about 4 seconds. It continued to close, and in the pit window it has closed up massively to the point it's less than a second now. Jeremy De Boever at this point does have in front of him Matthew Prouting, and Matthew Prouting has come out ahead of a pair of them. I'm wondering what's happened here with regards to the pit stops and whatnot. Well, Jeremy De Boever has taken his tyre change, so has Peter Lemkins. Matthew Prouting, on the other hand, did he take his tyre change in the first pit stop? I don't quite remember. I think he may have actually, the Eclipse Racing driver. I think he did take that tyre change in the first pit stop, unless I'm mistaken. We'll wait and see. But as he makes his way down the back straight here, Matthew Prouting has made this work, albeit now he's got to hold off De Boever and also Peter Lemkins for the rest of this race if he wants to try and bring home what we would expect is the win, or if not, definitely on the podium for the GT3 Pro class. As he comes on through, Dirt bounces into the pits as well from the class. Sean Scooter as well down in P8, Dirt bounce from P2. Didi Valente stays out on circuit, and Lucas Romano does the same, but it is all definitely kicking off and flying high with regards to our drivers as they make the way on around. But as they continue to push around the circuit right now, it is one of those situations whereby we can see that Jeremy De Boever here has got a lot to think about in terms of Prouting ahead of him, and also Peter Lemkins behind him. As we see there, Prouting going a little bit slowly on the low line down into turn 1, but I think Prouting there just settling the car down and going into the corner as he naturally does. But you can see Jeremy De Boever definitely taking a lot, and in fact Prouting there going very slowly. I think he's picked up some sort of slowdown for his troubles, but Matthew Prouting going very slowly and letting both drivers through. I'm wondering if there's a problem with that BMW, whether something is broken on the car or whether it is just a slowdown penalty, because Prouting would not yield normally, and well, that has hurt him massively and taken him out of contention for what we think would be the lead and the potential win of this GT3 Pro class, at least for the time being, but of course anything can happen. As they make the way around and out of the arena, out of the infield, it is the case that we can see that Jeremy De Boever here in what is that P3 position. We believe it will become what is the lead of the class in short order, although I say that Lucas Romano has taken his second stop off camera and he's now in P2. Now we know that Lucas Romano did not take the tyre change in his first pit stop, and looking at his pit time, it was a short pit. It was not the approximately 1 minute and 38 seconds that we come to expect, or around that region, sometimes around 1 minute and 33 seconds of the fastest stops. I think Lucas Romano here may not have changed tyres, and if so, that may mean that as a result they would effectively be disqualified after the race in terms of those results. We'll wait and find out post-race, but Romano right now, he's soldiering on. I think he'll feel as though he's done everything he needs to, but I'm not 100% sure if that is the case here as he makes his way across that timeline. Of course, I could be wrong. Again, all I've got is the information I have in front of me here and having to do predictions based on pit times, but right now Romano doing everything he can to try and bring home the win here as he takes the lead of the class off of Didi Valente, who comes into the pit. Jeremy De Boever and Peter Lemkins are both promoted up positions. Of course, they've returned to their natural racing order, and then we can see just behind him Matthew Prouting there, who does have a fast charging Tristan De Boever trying to close up to the back of him. As they make the way through turn 2 and up into turn 3, it is the case that we look from them to the leaders of what is the of the LMP2 class, and Paul Scott right now, well, he is opening up that gap to Paul Walton. That gap has opened up to 5.5 seconds almost here, But I would say it is a sign that Paul Walton has definitely got an ace up his sleeve, because they are both pushing, both lapping in the low 35s. In fact, that last lap for Paul Scott, a 34.8. What about Paul Walton by comparison? It was a 35.6. In fact, Paul Walton a bit slower that lap. Now, unless Paul Walton has got something wrong with the car after that contact we saw earlier with Sean Scooter, I think the RD SimSport driver here is definitely trying to save fuel, whereas Paul Scott is going all in. I think Scott is due one more stop. They have both changed tyres. We saw that in their second stops, but we'll wait and find out what Paul Scott's strategy is. If Paul Scott's going to the end on this one without having to make another stop, then Paul Scott has just upped his pace. He's upped it to a level which Paul Walton has not been able to respond to, but we will wait and see. As meanwhile, we look down to the P7 and P6 battle in the GT3 AM class, and we can see Arjen Kregel here chasing after what is Davide Favo as they make their way into the bus stop chicane. Now, as they roll them through the corner here, it is the case that Arjen Kregel giving it that pursuit and trying to find a way on through in terms of getting that P6 position. And we did see these two battling earlier in the race, or in fact I think it was between Kregel and also Gualtieri, unless I'm mistaken. But it is Ferrari versus Lamborghini. It is the case that the two Italian machines, albeit one of them powered by an Audi engine, and that's the Lambo in front, as they make their way down towards turn at number 1. And as they roll on through here, it's going to be Kregel taking the high line. He's going to dare to dream to go around the outside. Now, can he make it under braking? Not quite. Can he get Favo to go deep under braking? Not quite either, but he does on exit get much better traction through the cutback, and it's as a result, it means that Kregel's got a potential opportunity here, but it may be upset a bit by Price going through. The LMP2 drive from iRacing comes from the inside, and the Dutchman has to wait again. He won't have the opportunity to seize on having that momentum coming out to turn 1 as they make their way out towards turn 5 now. Of course, Arjen Kregel, I think what he'll think in his mind is he does have an advantage. Davide Favo there just understeers wide out through turn number 4. He's going to literally drive back onto the circuit, but he'll do so in a very controlled manner. He brings it, and in fact, Favo, credit to him for getting that car stopped. I can imagine that might have been a bit of a nightmare to do, and Liam Tack there had to put on the brakes, being a couple of laps down. Of course, Liam Tack will be wary of the fact he's not racing these guys at this point. He's just making it to the end now, given the fact that he's quite a way down Davide Favo. But Favo, and then getting that car stopped, that could have been a very hairy situation for the Lamborghini driver and indeed anybody else out on the circuit, but very safely getting it stopped in the end. But we look from him to the fastest man in the LMP2 class right now, and it is fellow South African Stephan Wessels from Racing Team Astra Blue, who is flying. He's just put the fastest lap of the race for the LMP2s at a 34.65. He is chasing Sam Holman. In fact, that's Holman in the front of the picture there as they make their way down in towards turn number 5, and the camera turns round. Holman is under pressure, and this is coming very late in the day for the Hollerton Racing driver. He's got less than half an hour to go, and I think he would have been hoping that Wessels would not have closed up as rapidly as he has, because right now I think Wessels is going to be a story of when, not if, he looks at that potential overtake as they make their way into turn number 6. Now, as they roll them through the corners here, it is the case. What can Holman do to hold off the fast charging Wessels? Well, I think he's got to try and simply curb all his momentum out of what is the bus stop chicane under brake. He's got to find a way to disrupt the momentum of Wessels, park it on apex potentially, and then will Wessels set the fastest lap, and then Paul Scott has responded with an even faster lap of a 34.513, and that shows you how much Paul Scott wants to win, plus also the fastest lap of the race. And really, they are pushing it right now. The top 4 in the LMP2 AM class are giving it everything, but Holman has got Wessels, and Wessels already getting the run as they make their way on the bank in a 12, and as they come through the long left-hander here, it's going to be Holman holding the low line versus Wessels on the outside. Has Wessels gone too early? That's the question here. He hasn't got much of an overspeed. In fact, they're both hitting the limiter, and Holman into the pits here for his third and final stop, that's going to be. So Holman deciding to call it early rather than battle. He, I think, feels that he doesn't need to battle with Wessels. He needs to focus more on bringing home that result, whether it's P3 or P4. Those results will stay the same in terms of his mind. He'll just want the points and take it home. Now, will Wessels need to make a pit stop? As if so, he's come up behind traffic, and look at the traffic he's come up behind, which is James Slate's battling with Navarro De Boever, and these two have come together in very short order. Now, in terms of the story of how they've come together, it is the case that Navarro De Boever has found a way to catch up, and as they make the way down into turn number 5, it's one of the situations whereby Wessels came through in the end, but he'll have lost some time because of this. And is it the case that Holman has found the right time to pit, and could he potentially undercut Stephan Wessels when the Wessels comes into the pits? If Wessels comes into the pits, that is the big question. We'll have to wait and see. But James Slate's right now holding on to that P2 position in what is the GT3 AM class, but Navarro De Boever all over the back of him like a bad rash. And as they make their way through the bank in the 7 here, Navarro De Boever is going to be made to go high versus James Slates on the low. And as they come down the back straight, it's going to be side by side. Audi on the inside under brake, and the Ferrari gets ahead, and Slates backs off here. He decides, no, there's no need to battle into the bus stop chicane. He's going to instead look to tuck into the slipstream on exit, but I think he's gone a little bit wide of his ideal line. I think he understeered on entry, and that's actually cost Slates quite dearly. In fact, that has cost him massively. He's now 1.1 seconds behind as he gets himself up to speed, coming through the bank in the 12, and I think Navarro De Boever there timed it to perfection. I think James Slates actually cost himself by just not getting the turn in that he wanted to into the bus stop chicane with the dirty air of that Ferrari just compromising his entry. But still, he will try and close up now as they make their way down towards turn number 1 once again. Still just over 20 minutes to go here, but it's battle for P2 in the GT3 AM class. It's going to go down to the wire at the rate it's going, because right now neither driver can seem to get the upper hand on the other without the battle coming back to halt them a couple of laps later. As they make their way on around, we do look to Richard Stanton here, who we are hearing is now up into P7. In fact, we can see he's in P7 here on our screen, and well, with him in P7, we can see it's a situation whereby a little bit further up the road, well, there's Sam Holman. Our timing screens are a little bit inaccurate there, folks. I thought Sam Holman had caught up to Wessels, but it is not the case. We were going to say that Richard Stanton has been promoted to P7 with Mark Baker retiring from the race, and I believe it is the case that they've decided to retire the car due to technical issues. The team Tech Rouge not scoring any points here today, which is very unfortunate, with Mark Baker retiring and Paul Williams absent. But as we see Sam Holman here making his way around, and well, will it be the case that Stephan Wessels comes into the pits? We see Paul Walton into the pit lane again. So Walton has decided to come in. Now this is getting very, very interesting. It's another spin in the tail. Well, something in terms of the strategy for Paul Walton has not gone right. Well, in fact, he's come through the pit lane, and has he actually had any stationary time? I'm not 100% sure he has had any time. I wonder if that's a drive-through penalty. As he makes his way back up to speed now, just trying to see if he's actually made a stop. Well, he has made a stop, Paul Walton, so it is the case he's come on in, and I think he's had a little bit of time in the pits. But Walton right now, having made that third stop, well, in fact, it's a drive-through penalty. It is confirmed to us by the man himself in the YouTube chat, and well, with that in mind, it is RD Simsport here or now on the back foot, because with that drive-through penalty, which has cost him 35 seconds, well, in fact, it's cost him the best part of about 20 seconds, can Walton get back at Paul Scott? Well, the only way he's going to get back at this time will be if Paul Scott has to come in to take an actual pit stop, and we are thinking that that is the case. But if Paul Scott has to make another stop, it will be a very short stop. He will do a splash and dash, but that could just upset the apple cart one more time in the battle for the win in the LMP 2 AM class. We will wait and see, but Paul Scott right now pushing on as he makes his way down towards the start-finish line, and we will keep our eyes on whether he does peel on in, but right now no signs of coming in for the time being. But whilst he's making his way on around, we do look to the battle for P2 in what is the GT3 Pro class, and keep in mind as well, we do have a question mark over Lucas Romano in terms of has he changed tyres in this race. If not, that woman is disqualified from the final result. But I can tell you that Jeremy De Boever has broken away from Peter Lemkins, and in fact Lemkins now under pressure from Matthew Prouting as he comes on through very forcefully there past Tristan De Boever, and you can see Matthew Prouting, who would love to have capitalised on that, but he wasn't able to because the leader of the GT3 AM class is between them, and getting very, very frustrated, I would say, with the fact that Lemkins forced his way through to turn 1. And now as we ride on board with Prouting here, well, this is the place where you want to sort of be when you're trying to attack, because right now you can see Dino Regan not in a happy mood with the way that Lemkins has come on through, flashing his lights once again there, and as they make the way into turn 5, well, it's going to be the case that Lemkins is effectively having to battle here with Tristan De Boever, who's trying to come back on through. I think he feels he's got the pace, and Matthew Prouting now, if he can capitalise on this and play it smart, he could get past Lemkins and take that final spot on the podium out on circuit as they make the way out to turn 6 and onto the bank in the 7. As they come on through here, De Boever tucks in behind, and we look, of course, from the popcorn seat view, the spectator's view, the ideal view of Prouting watching everything unfold in front of him, and he'll want to be mindful of the fact, as we see that Lemkins stays low, he's going to defend here, and as they make the way down, a little bit of connectivity issues there for Lemkins, but nothing too serious. De Boever's going to go to the outside and look to cut in, and Prouting's going to get a huge run here as they come out of the bus stop chicane. Whether he wanted a good run, this is it for the BMW M4 driver as they make the way onto the curving at 12. 12, and as they come through, it is the case now. He'll have the double toe Prouting. Can he make something of this? Well, that Ferrari, of course, when it's in the slipstream is strong, and Prouting with that double toe, it will now be starting to be felt as he's gone into 6th gear. He's in the overdrive gear, and as he makes his way down towards turn 1, you can see Paul Walton coming on through there, staying on that high line, setting the fastest lap of the racing class, and you can see Tristan De Boever with a tap to the rear of Peter Lemkins. It looked like a tap from this perspective, but right now it is the case that Lemkins is having to deal with the fact he's got a battle with somebody not in his class who wants to come on through and really feels as though he's got the pace. And well, I think Peter Lemkins right now will not be happy with the way this situation is developing. He would have thought that he would simply have passed Tristan De Boever and then broken off into the distance, but De Boever has got other ideas as they make the way through the infield section once again here with less than 18 minutes to go. And as they roll them through it now, what will Lemkins do? I think he's just going to simply try and sit tight and keep Tristan De Boever behind him and use them as a spacing tool versus Prouting, because so long as he's got De Boever between himself and Prouting, he does have some sort of defence other than the defence he can concoct of his own as they make the way through turn number 6 and head up onto the bank in the 7. As they roll them through, Stephan Wessels into the pits for his 3rd and final pit stop, and as Wessels comes out, it's a very short stop, so it is the case he's had to come in to take a tiny splash and dash of fuel, which we were expecting for our LMP 2 drivers we talked about earlier. What about Paul Scott? Well, no signs of that pit stop yet, I can definitely tell you that, but we look back to that battle for P3 in the GT3 PRO class, and we see Peter Lemkins again having to go defensive into the bus stop chicane here, and well, this is not the way you want it, and now Matthew Prouting extremely close to the back of Tristan De Boever. Now this has got to be the ultimate toe as they make the frame. You can see Tristan De Boever there going high, and I think deciding, you know what, okay, I've got another pro coming through, I might as well let the pair of you go. And well, De Boever doesn't need to fight, to be fair. He has got a 55.5 second advantage over James Slates right now. I think De Boever can back off the throttle a little bit as they make the way on through. As they come charging on down towards turn number 1 here, Matthew Prouting now, he hasn't been able to capitalise as much as he would like with Peter Lemkins being under that pressure, and the Eclipse Racing driver's now got it all to do once again in terms of finding a way on through. As they make the way down towards turn number 3 here, you can see Prouting look into that outside line, taking that natural line. Lemkins going deep. This could be the opportunity, and Prouting immediately capitalised on it. And Peter Lemkins, with a small uncharacteristic mistake, loses the position to Prouting. But now the problem for Prouting is, as we ride on board the gearbox of the Eclipse Racing driver, will he find Lemkins go for the dive on the inside into 5? Not quite. But remember, whilst he stays ahead right now as they exit out of turn 5 there, if he stays ahead going up into the banking of turn 7, that is where Lemkins is going to have all the slipstream he needs to come on back and particularly run out the bus stop chicane through 12 and down towards 1 again, as they will have less than 15 minutes to go come the end of this lap. And we're hearing that Jeremy De Boever has found his way past James Slates a bit further down the road in the battle for what is the P2 in the AM class. Right now, Matthew Prouting holding on to that P3 in the Pro class as he makes his way down this back straight. In fact, coming in towards the bus stop here, I think he's more than comfortable this time around. But as we look from him to Jeremy De Boever here, who's in P2 in the GT3 AM class, we can't bring you the move that was made, but we can definitely tell you that Jeremy De Boever is now ahead of James Slates, as we see it just behind him there. That is Stanton. That is Richard Stanton, who has tucked in behind him, unless I'm very much mistaken. That is the driver of Paul Scott, who's in this traffic jam right now, and Paul Scott's lead over Paul Walton will be cut into as a result of this. That's 6.5 seconds you see there on the board between the two of them. It's not accurate. We'll bring you an update on that gap very shortly. But right now, James Slates, well, he will be thinking about trying to let Paul Scott go, but at the same time stay with Jeremy De Boever, and he does so quite nicely going onto the bank into turn 7. As they roll through and down towards the bus stop chicane, you can see Slates gaining very gradually versus De Boever as they head down. And now, with less than 15 minutes to go, it is the case. Will Slates have the run? Not this time, but he'll look to have the run going into turn 1. As into the pits comes Jonathan Collins. I can see out my commentary box window. And, well, Peter Lemkins tucked in behind Matthew Prouting, still further around the circuit as Collins enters the pit lane. And we continue to watch James Slates here. And, in fact, we ride on board with the Audi R8 LMS driver as he looks at potential move on the Ferrari in front of him. Now as they head down to what is turn number 1 here, you can see the overspeed being picked up here, albeit Slates is nearing the rev limiter. He looks low, he can't go any lower than that. He is going to be made to go high. It's going to be a drag race as they head towards 1. They're side by side as they go into the braking zone. You can see De Boever holds it nice and tight and low. Slates are going to try and bring it all the way around the outside. He's given the room to do so. It's still going to be a drag race. They emerge from 1 into 2. brilliant racing between the two AM drivers here, and as they make their way into turn 3, it's Slates on the inside here. I think he's got into the hairpin, but he goes overly deep, and Slates then misses his braking zone on that inside line, and he costs himself what would have been a classic pass of P2. And Navarro De Boever now runs off into the distance for this one. He knows he's been given another lifeline here in terms of holding on to that P2, and he's going to try and seize everything he can now out of it. But to be fair, credit to James Slates for trying to go for that move. It was a very well set up move, but just missing his braking zone in the end. And I think being on that inside line, particularly at night time as well, where visibility is not as good, plus also track temperature comes down to a degree, it is the case that James Slates are just being caught out. I think if he just hit that braking zone about 5 to 10 metres earlier, he could be in P2 right now. You can see there as he emerges from turn 6, a little bit snap oversteer, the frustration of making an error, but still, it's going to be a great performance. Even if he finishes P3 today, definitely a great drive from the RP Mosport Pro AM driver, and one that can do him well going into rounds 5 to 8 of the season, going into that second third of the season. But right now we look from Slates to the leader of the LMP2 AM class here as he makes his way down towards what is turn number 1, and Paul Scott goes past the timeline once again here, sets a personal best of the race, which is a 34.0 versus Paul Walton on a 33.81, the fastest lap last time around. Paul Walton is going for it, he's going all in, he's got nothing to lose now to win this race, and Paul Scott here has just got to keep nursing his car to the finish. But the problem, of course, for Paul Scott is if he has got one more pit stop to go, Paul Walton, with a 23-second gap that he is closing in, is going to retake that lead. There is no question about it right now. He lost approximately 20 to 24 seconds through that drive-through penalty. Remember, Scott, if he does have to come in, will be stationary for a period of time to put a small amount of fuel in the car. That will be enough to turn the posts over with regards to who is the leader and who's in second. As we say hello to Katie Eames in the Facebook chat, who says some decent racing tonight from most, and a round of applause indeed. Great racing up and down the field from our drivers, and we can see here Michael Price now, the Excite Racing driver in P7 in the LMP2 AM class, battling with Jonathan Collins for what is P6. Of course, it's not the place they want to be battling for, but they're battling for it nonetheless, and they're going to take everything they can to get an extra couple of points out of tonight's racing as they make their way down towards turn number 5. And as they come into the braking zone here, I can report that Peter Lempkins has just set the fastest lap of the GT3 PRO class, which is a 44.38. He's absolutely flying as well. As we see off circuit there, that's Liam Tack, who's had a bit of a moment at turn 5 and returning very gradually. He, of course, P9 in the GT3 AM class, but Michael Price here getting a very nice exit along with Collins out of turn number 6. Both of them very similar on pace, to be fair, and as they make their way around right now, both having made their third and final stops, we do believe that Michael Price will be looking for that move momentarily, but Jonathan Collins wise to the defence. He is a very good defensive driver, and we'll have to see if the Excite Racing driver and Michael Price can find a way past the privateers. He starts to look at that potential move to the inside. He creeps the car to the inside on the braking. In fact, Collins quite heavy on the brakes by comparison with Price, who goes in a bit deep, and as he tries to carry the car through, hits the wall there, just a bit too much momentum coming out of the bus stop chicane, and Price pays it in the end, pays the price, I should say, not to try and put a pun on his name, and I apologise for that. It is the case. He gets it wrong and clatters the wall there, albeit not too heavy in impact, but that will not be what he wants, and that may be some aero and suspension damage on the front right side of the car. When you have to come into the pits, you have to check his steering rack and see whether that's been upset. If not, he may be able to carry on without an extra pit stop. As he makes his way onto another lap, we do look back to Peter Lempkins, who's in the wall, and Peter Lempkins would jump to the pits there. Well, I'm not sure what happened. I think that was the wall around turn 3 or 5. He was in the tyre barrier, and well, with that has released Matthew Prouty into P3 in the what is the GT3 Pro class, and it has released Jeremy De Boever to essentially bring home that P2 as he sets a personal best of the race. Well, previously he set a personal best, and now he's setting up a personal best at 44.8 versus Lucas Romano, who did a 44.8 as well, albeit Jeremy De Boever 700ths faster. But we do believe that right now, Jeremy De Boever here, if he can't match the pace on Lucas Romano, we do of course have that question on the RP Mosport Pro AM driver, whether he has taken a tyre change over the course of this race. His pit stop times would not indicate it, but it could be a glitch in our timing screens. But Lucas Romano, if so, has found a way to recover this one in terms of coming from what was a difficult start and bringing his way all the way through the order. And as he makes his way around right now and building up the pace. In fact, well, I have just had confirmation, ladies and gentlemen. It is the case that I have heard it's the situation whereby, excuse me, that Lucas Romano has not changed tyres. There's been an issue, there's been a mix-up in the pit lane, so what that will mean, as I'm to understand it based on rules, is that at the end of this race, when the results are confirmed, Lucas Romano will be disqualified from that win, which is very unfortunate for the Belgian, and in return, it will be Jeremy De Boever, who right now is the effective leader of the GT3 PRO class. So drama at this late stage, and Lucas Romano right now, well, it's the case that unless he recognises he's got to come in, which I don't think he's going to recognise with the time remaining, otherwise he would have come in by now, they would have figured it out surely. It's going to be the case that Jeremy De Boever will be bringing this one home for the win. He'll be classified as P2, but it will be a P1 in the class, but everything is settling down now, and well, with the time remaining, we still do just have 8 minutes to go. Are there any other close battles out on the circuit is the big question. We look to Paul Scott here, and right now Paul Scott pressing on, doing everything he can. Peter Lemkins has left the pit lane. After that, he's used the fast repair, so he's still in the race. And Paul Scott into the pit. We thought it was going to happen, and it has happened. Now, is this going to see the reversal? I think it is, because that is a pit stop. He's coming into his box. Where is Paul Walton? Here's the RD Simsport driver coming through turn number 12. It's got to be surely Walton's got to retake the lead here, because Paul Scott's not going to have enough time to get the pit stop. He's done a quick splash and dash, and now as they make the way through, well, where is Paul Scott in the pit lane? Well, in fact, he's still parked up here. He's not leaving it. It's going to be a splash and dash. Paul Walton retakes the lead, and there is, ladies and gentlemen, a drive-through penalty can't stop him. He's now back into the lead of the class, and with 7 minutes to go, Walton now's just got to bring it to the finish. We won't want to do that. He won't want to go off circuit and get it all wrong as he makes his way through turn number 3, but it is the case that right now, where is Paul Scott? He's still being serviced. And Paul Scott, well, he'll be looking at that and thinking it's all gone wrong. And in fact, we're just hearing that Paul Scott had picked up a 40-second penalty for entering the pit lane too quickly, for speeding into the pit lane. With that in mind, where is Stephan Wessels in all of this? It's all gone tragically wrong for Paul Scott, with the fact that he's had a penalty added to the fact he's had a pit stop that's essentially robbed him of the win. Well, he's leaving the pit lane now. He's had that, and he's going to come back out in P2. I'm certain of that, because Wessels is only making his way through turn number 12. But my goodness, what last-minute drama in the LMP2 AM battle for the race win, in the fact that Paul Scott, with that pit stop plus a speeding penalty in the pit lane, it has all gone wrong in terms of his chance of taking the win. Because if he'd come out just after refueling, you could argue he may have had a chance to put some pressure on. He would have to absolutely go hammer and tongs with regards to the pace, just to hope that Walton would make a mistake somewhere. But now it is the case that Paul Scott has got it all to do, and he hasn't got enough time. 51 seconds is the delta, but at the same time, it is Stephan Wessels who is 13.5 seconds down on him. I don't think Wessels is going to catch him now unless Paul Scott makes an error. As we say hello to Paul Scott live in the YouTube chat there, and well, we do appreciate you clarifying with regards to that pit entry, Paul, as that you make your way around now to wrap up this race. But indeed, last minute moments as our drivers make the way on around, and well, as we look to Lucas Romano here, it is an absolute shame that it has gone wrong at this last possible moment. And as we do check in with our stewards, we have had that confirmation, of course, with regards to that difficulty in the pit lane as he makes his way on around. And you've got to feel for the RP Mosport Pro AM driver, because he has had to literally try and salvage everything he can out of this race. And to be fair, if he had taken the tyre change and there hadn't been that mix up in the pit lane, I do think Lucas Romano would have had a chance of being on the podium, if not definitely a P4. But right now the RP Motorsport Pro AM driver is going to see this race disappear out of his hands. It will be, I think, a nullified result come the end of it based on the ruling, and with regards to not having followed the rules with regards to the pit stops here today. But still, one to learn from, and in fact might be a drop round Daytona for Lucas Romano as he makes his way on around turn number 12. Meanwhile, Jonathan Collins, as we look up towards our LMP2 drivers here, where he's chasing after Price, but Price has gained the upper hand on the privates here in the end as they make the way on around, and Collins in P7 in the class once again as he finds his way up the inside here of Navarro De Boever, who gives him all the space he needs into turn number 5 to come on through. And I think Navarro De Boever will do the same for Gus Franken in a short while, as right now Navarro De Boever does not have that pressure of James Slate. He's 3.5 seconds ahead of James Slates, but at the same time Slates is catching at a very rapid rate, in fact. And well, could Slates put some last minute pressure on Navarro De Boever? That will be a concern for him. It's not long to go before this race is over. And where is James Slates, I hear you ask? Well, here he is as he makes his way onto the turn 7 banking himself. As they make the way through 4 minutes of this race to go, and really the major battles now all said and done. And I think it's all about who makes it to the end of this race without any more last-minute drama. Of course, it's not over until the checker flag waves and they cross that finish line. You've got to finish the race to get the result. You can't have it 75% or 99.9% of the race distance completed unless it's the case the race is red flagged. But we don't do what Formula 1 does with regards to cancelling races after one lap. Spa-Francorchamps in 2021, it is the case that we are carrying on until the very end where we can. And as our drivers make their way on around, it is the case that James Slate's here, as I said earlier, will be, I think, taking a little bit of pride with regards to this P3 and knowing he had the pace for that P2 finish, definitely. And in the end, it was just one extra mistake which cost him that P2 versus Navarro De Boever. He is putting in personal best right now, a 45.0 for James Slate, setting that brilliant pace as he makes his way out of turn number 1 and heads down towards turn 3, and he is delivering these laps, and he is one to watch as we go into the second third of the season. There is no question about that. He is showing a lot of form here at Daytona, and I can only imagine how he's going to be driving that Audi at the Red Bull Ring in 2 weeks' time. And we look from him to the leader here of what is the LMP2 AM class with only 3 laps to go as he goes on to another lap here, and as he makes his way onto lap 73 for Paul Walton right now, it's all gone his way. And well, can he set the fastest lap of the race in terms of his class? Well, the fastest lap is owned by Paul Walton, in fact, a 33.81. So he doesn't need to worry about that either. I think he's got it all wrapped up unless Paul Scott can pull a magical lap out on the final couple of laps here, which he may be able to do. As Paul Walton makes his way around here, it is the case this race has gone just the way he wanted it in the end, albeit that drive-through penalty will not be something he will have wanted, but I think he would have also thought to himself about the fact Paul Scott may have needed an extra pit stop, and could that have worked out to his favour. We see Paul Scott, meanwhile, it is going to be what is a very well fought second place in the end, and just one little mistake has cost him dearly as he makes his way on towards what is only a couple of laps remaining here. As he comes on through, we do look back to the battle between James Slate and Navarro De Boever for P2 in the GT3 AM class. And well, in terms of that progression, the gap has now come down to 2.7 seconds as they go on to another lap very shortly. Here is James Slate as he makes his way across that timeline. And where is Navarro De Boever, I hear you ask? Well, he's not too much further up the road. Yeah, Stephan Wessels just coming up behind him very shortly, and also Gus Franken. And there is Navarro De Boever, and this is a horrible situation for the challenged by DB2 driver, because he has a GT3 PRO driver behind him who is going to look up the inside to come on through here. It is the case that Gus Franken has a little bit more pace, but also keep in mind that Gus Franken is racing for RP Motorsport. Now, I'm not saying he's going to intentionally do anything in order to hurt Navarro De Boever versus James Slate, but it is the case, of course, that it may be the case he just takes a little bit longer in terms of getting past Navarro De Boever, and that could just cost 1 or 2 extra attempts in order to help James Slate out. And to be fair, Gus Franken has made the pass very clearly indeed. He's done it fine, but also you can see there Stephan Wessels coming through. Navarro De Boever is being pushed backwards in towards James Slate right now, and it's going to be a nightmare as they make the way out of turn 6. In fact, it's cost him so much time. Navarro De Boever now has to literally fight to hold on as they make the way through the turn 7 banking here with less than half a minute to go by the time they get down to the bus stop chicane, and then we will be on to that final lap. In fact, the race leader, the overall leader, is already on that final lap of Paul Walton. So these guys will have one more lap as they make the way on around. But Navarro De Boever right now in a horrible situation, and this is not where he'll want to be as he makes his way on through. But as he comes, oh goodness me, James Slate gets it wrong. He gets it wrong on the entry to the bus stop chicane, and it's another mistake which costs him right at the final juncture. And he's got to get that car turned around, because otherwise it's going to be Lorenzo Gualtieri's going to come on through here in order to take that P3 from him right at the end of the race. And that is tragic for James Slate, who finally gets himself up to speed, but he's lost the place. But meanwhile, coming through to finish his race as he makes his way through turn 12. Well, he started towards the front and he showed his pace from the outset, but as he makes his way through the final corner, there will have been a heart attack with that drive-through penalty. But I think he always had it up his sleeve with regards to doing one less pit stop than everybody else, because he takes the checker flag. Paul Walton from RD Simsport is your winner at Daytona in the LMP2 AM class here in the IMB Raceway lobby, finishing in the end what will be 55 seconds plus ahead of Paul Scott, his main rival. But meanwhile, as I try to make the way through, it is the case that Lucas Romano is classified as our winner out on track, but due to the pit error, it will be Jeremy De Boever who, from a change by DB1, takes the win in the GT3 Pro class. You'll take that win in the end by 2 seconds ahead of Matthew Prouty from Eclipse Racing, and it will be Jeremy De Boever, who is classified as P3 in the GT3 PRO as he comes across the line. And then in the AM class, it is Tristan De Boever, who's already crossed the line, the Racing Team Astra Blue driver, with a phenomenal drive from start to finish, a flawless drive from the Racing Team Astra Blue driver. And I think in his mind, he will know that he's got the pace now to take the fight to Navarro De Boever in the rest of the season. Meanwhile, coming across that line now, Paul Scott coming home for NXTGEN Racing, P2 in the LMP2 AM class. In the end, it was one mistake at the pit stop. That final pit stop at a 40-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane, which has cost him so dearly. But a P2 all the same, and a brilliant fight between him and Walton all the way through. And then Stephan Wessels is to complete the podium of the LMP2 AM class. He's had a dramatic race. There's no doubt about that. That first half an hour cost him so much time, but in the end, recover to P3 is testament to his determination in order to get those results. Meanwhile, looking back to our GT3 AMs, Navarro De Boever has just crossed the line, finishing in the end at P2 in the GT3 AM class. A solid drive by them, challenged by DB2 driver. And in catching up with his father in the build-up tonight, Jeremy De Boever was saying that they were both looking to get the best possible result in order to keep their championship campaigns alive. Well, Navarro De Boever has done the best he can to mitigate the win from Tristan De Boever, and Jeremy De Boever, with another win, continues to extend his advantage. And P3 went to Lorenzo Gaultier in the end, with James Slates losing it, but a fantastic race through and through, ladies and gentlemen. Let's bring you those race results in very short order. So in the end, the final classification is as follows. Subject to the stewards' inquiries, of course, Paul Walton taking the overall win by 56 seconds over Paul Scott in an absolutely superb drive and a brilliant back and forth battle between Walton and Scott. And that 56-second margin does not tell the full story of the back and forth tactical battle between the two of them. One that was won on strategy in the end by Walton, and the mistake by Paul Scott in entering the pit lane too fast. But outside of them, Stephan Wessels coming home in P3 in the end, ahead of Sam Holman and Richard Stanton, completing the top 5. Credit to Sam Holman, the best of the rest already outside of the podium there, and Jonathan Collins and Michael Price, the last of our LMPs classified as crossing the finish line out of the circuit. Lucas Romano there coming home P8 on circuit for the GT3 Pros, but of course disqualified due to what was the pit error with regards to not taking that tyre change. So that means the win goes to P9 overall finisher Jeremy De Boever there. He takes the win in the GT3 Pro class ahead of Matthew Prouting and Jeremy De Boever completing the GT3 Pro podium in P12. But between Boever and Prouting is your winner in the GT3 AM class, Tristan De Boever, who came home P11 overall in the end. A superb drive from the Racing Team Astra Blue driver, and he finished ahead of Boever. Dirt bouts there, and also Navarro De Boever, Gus Franken and Lorenzo Gaultieri, with Navarro De Boever finishing P14 and Lorenzo Gaultieri P16 overall. They complete your GT3 AM podium. We then have James Slates P17 in a day where he just could not seem to get the car to point in the line long enough to finish on the podium. It's very unfortunate for the RP Mosport Pro AM driver, but he will bounce back from it, that I'm 100% sure. Gareth Mills in the end taking a P5 in the GT3 AM class on his return to the series. That's fantastic for the GM Racing driver, a very well earned result. And then looking further down, Peter Lemkins P19 with that disaster in the infield right towards the end, costing him a potential podium, if not the win in the GT3 Pro class. Arjen Kregel P20 there, Davide Favo P21, Mark Sykes P22, Liam Tatt P23, Sean Scudder P24, and well, it is the case that Liam Tatt and Sean Scudder with difficult races, but classified as finished as I understand it. But Mark Baker, Jack Wyborn, Chris Keenan and Kurt Van Hoenacker are 4 retirements over the course of today. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, we now get ready for our post-race interviews with our selected drivers. Do not go anywhere. We'll be back in approximately 5 minutes to bring in those interviews. Indeed, some very insightful ones on the cards, I can guarantee. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we are set for our post-round interviews of our drivers. And tonight, we're going to be bringing you interviews with drivers from our LMP2 AM class. They were readily available. And we're going to be kicking off with the one and only Paul Walton, our winner in the class as of tonight, in a brilliant back-and-forth display between himself and Paul Scott, but in the end, having that advantage. And let's bring our race winner then into the interview room. Well, as he makes his way into the interview room now, Paul, a superb win from yourself. Start to finish, however, a very close battle between yourself and Paul Scott. How does this win feel to you today at Daytona?
It was great. Sorry, I was mid-sentence with Holman. 1 second. It feels great. It was a really tough race. I had a plan from the get-go, and I executed it perfectly, minus a little drive-through penalty. Ignore that.
Well, indeed, there was the drive, and I apologise for pinching you just whilst you were speaking to Sam Holman. But with regards to the race as a whole, we'll come on to the intricacies of the end in a brief moment. Given the fact you were starting towards the front of the LMP2 class, what was the strategy for this one? Was it a case to try and break away nice and early, or were you thinking more about that bigger picture, particularly the risk of that third pit stop with the fuel situation?
Initially, I just wanted to break away and get going. And then after about halfway through the first stint, I realized I've been using far too much fuel, far too much fuel, and just let off completely. I think that was when Paul Scott started to close down on me.
I see. And then when you realised that you were using too much fuel and you had to start sort of changing the strategy, did you manage to work out very quickly sort of what you needed to do? Or was it one of those ones where you had to try and invent the strategy on the spot?
In the first stint, I was aiming for the extra lap. Just the one extra lap, just to overshoot everybody, looking for the 40-minute mark, because 40 minutes is a third of the race, right? So I stopped at about 39 minutes. So I thought, okay, I'm just about in the window for the 2-stop. So that was when I was starting to feel a bit more hopeful about it.
I see. And then translating it into late in the race, of course, we saw with Paul Scott pitting early, he was going for that undercut, but it didn't quite work out, and you made the overcut work. But in then having to fuel save whilst also staying competitive versus Paul Scott, who was pushing for that free stop, did the temptation at any point sort of creep in to return to the free stop to really just shoot it out with Paul Scott, or was it sort of, no, you're going to stick to the plan, you're going to make this work?
I wanted to stick to the plan because I knew if I had pulled the 2-stop off, the gap would be huge at the end, and I wanted the satisfaction of that. Unfortunately, the drive-through hindered that a bit, but yeah, I wanted the gap.
So with that in mind, the drive-through, of course, the little bit of drama towards the end, that drive-through penalty, just what was it for firstly? And also, when it happened, in your mind, were you sort of, no, it's all gone wrong now? Or was it the case of, no, I've still got an advantage, I'm just going to have to push a little bit when I come out of my drive-through?
Regarding the what it was for a couple of car contacts and just lots of off tracks. Honestly, the bus stop was not kind to me, but I just kept it in. I seen Paul Scott was very good with his incidents. I think he finished with 6 incident points, and I finished with like 30, which isn't great for me, but yeah, it is what it is.
Okay, and with regards to the actual moment itself, when you had to take the drive-through, was it at that point you thought to yourself, you know what, this is over now in terms of I can't get the win, or was it still a case of you thinking to yourself, you know what, I've still got a pit stop in hand, I think I can still just about sneak this one away?
Yeah, I figured Paul Scott he's definitely still had a stop, because the second pit stop for me, I went 4 laps longer than him. So I had 5 laps in hand, and I figured there was absolutely no chance, because even me, I ran out of fuel on my last lap. Like after I crossed the finish line, I ran out of fuel before making it back to the pits. So I knew he had no chance of 2-stopping it. And at that point, I just kept the window in, kept him in 25 seconds. I knew at that point he had about 35 seconds to stop, and the gap would be about 10 seconds after the pit stop. So at that point, Paul Scott made his mistake, and then I was home free.
Oh, indeed. Just take us through that feeling with the 5 minutes remaining in the race. You've got that gap that's upwards of 50 seconds. Just what was going through your mind as you're heading towards the finish line?
Don't cry. Don't crash the car. Yeah. It's hard when you get a drive-through penalty, right? And you make mistakes like that. It kind of takes it away from it because you know you shouldn't have won because you took a penalty, but you still won because other people got penalties. It's like, you can do better, right? And I feel like I could have done better.
I see. Well, with that in mind, indeed, an attitude of always wanting to do better, which I think many will respect. I do indeed appreciate that mindset. And really looking ahead now to the second third of the season, we do head to the Red Bull Ring in 2 weeks' time to kick off the Series Tour of Europe. How are you feeling for the Red Bull Ring?
Oof. It's going to be difficult managing traffic there because a lot of the corners are mid-speed corners. So it'll be just a case of charging through traffic as fast as possible and not dying. Yeah.
Very well said, to be fair, and I could appreciate where you're coming from on that with regards to Red Bull Ring. And obviously, given the fact that you've only been able to take part in 2 rounds in this opening third of the season, I do have to ask, do you feel as though there's a bit of pressure on you to really perform, particularly in the next 3 to 4 rounds, because you're sort of making up for the fact you've got you've got 1 drop round and then 1 round which is 0-0 effectively?
Yeah, I'm just going to try and minimize any big accidents and minimize any last place finishes. If I can keep finishing in the top 5, top 3, I should be able to just keep moving forward. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do see. It's one of those ones whereby, by the sounds of things, that as long as you keep the momentum in the championship and keep the points coming in, it should naturally come to you.
Hopefully, yeah, that's the plan.
Well, we'll have to see if the plan plays out that way in due course. But until we meet again at the Red Bull Ring in 2 weeks' time, congratulations on a superb drive tonight. Very well-deserved win, despite all the challenges of the penalties. And thank you for joining us, as always, in the interview room.
You're very welcome. Good talking to you.
Have a lovely
Bye-bye.
evening.
Bye-bye.
Well, as we let Paul Walton go back to speaking to Sam Holman, well, I think he's gone back to speak to him briefly, and I do feel a little bit bad about pulling him away, but sometimes that does happen. It's the case, hearing from Paul Walton there, difficult to put it into words, I think, exactly how he felt at times there, given the fact that a very good performance, a very strong performance, albeit back and forth with Paul Scott throughout, but at the same time, undermined a little bit by a penalty. You never really want to win with a major penalty such as a drive-through, and you can understand from Paul Walton's perspective how he would feel about it, because you want to do it in the cleanest possible way, and therefore it may be hanging over his head a little bit with regards to it. But to be fair, his main rival picked up a major penalty as well. Mistakes were being made across the board, so he's not perfect, but he can definitely chase perfection. I think Walton is definitely going to be one to continue to watch as we go into the second third of the season at the Red Bull Ring. In his own words, it's a case of trying not to die as he cuts his way through traffic at the Red Bull Ring, but I think Walton has definitely got the pace to shine there. But as we now come on to our second driver interview, we come to Sam Holman, and it is the case our driver who finished P4 in the LMP2 AM class today. A bit of a mixed set of results, but really the best of the rest. Let's hear from him and bring him into the interview room very shortly. So as we bring Sam Holman into the interview room, we bring him on in now. Sam, it looked as though it was not perhaps the result you wanted in terms of being on the podium, but still a strong finish in P4 and really the best of the rest today. How was Daytona for you from your perspective? I think we might have some technical issues here, folks. Sam, your microphone's not coming through?
Oh.
Yep, you're coming through now.
Am I there?
Yep, you are here. You are here.
Oh, I'm not sure what's going on there. Am I still there?
Yep, you're all good.
Still there. Sorry, hey, threw me there. Yeah, no, I'm really pleased with it. I'm not sure how much you got of me there, so yeah, I'm actually really pleased with it. Would have loved to have kept the P3. I was there for an hour and a half, but I know I was watching my relative the whole time. Stephan was always there, nipping at the heels, whether he was on my heels or Price's. So yeah, it was one to watch, but I was 2 seconds off the pace in practice and qualifying, which is a bit unnerving, but I tend to get my head down in a race and just crack on. So yeah, well done to the 2 Pauls. They stormed off. Yeah, absolutely deserved the win in the second place there.
Oh, definitely. I could understand where you're coming from with regards to being in that P3 for so long, and in the end, P3 going away to Stephan Wessels right towards the end of the race. But at the same time, it looked like it was a very consistent race for yourself. Not really, I hate to say this, but you didn't get really too much camera time for the simple reason that, well, you're just keeping it nice and consistent, no drama, delivering lap after lap. Was that always the game plan going into tonight? Just keep it as simple as possible and keep it out of trouble and just get the points?
That's it. You'll have a letter from my sponsor shortly for that lack of coverage. But no, I'm not the quickest driver out there by lap. That's not a new thing. I've done a lot of endurance racing on iRacing, and I'm rarely the quickest member of the team. But I like to think I'm a relatively safe pair of hands. And when it's my time to do a stint, I can do it. We did Daytona last year, and we were P2 in P2 P2 and LMP2 up with an hour before, where we were taking out the race, sadly. So I know I can fight up there and put in consistent lap times, and we actually competed this year as well, and did some really long stints. So I was away with work this week. This is where all the racing driver excuses come out, so I'll just turn to chapter 13. But I was away a week from with work, and I've just had no time to practice, so I jumped on, and that's what happened.
Well, indeed. Well, despite the limitations on practice, a very solid performance. And in terms of the way you played the strategy of this race, we saw a relatively straightforward strategy from yourself, a free stop in the end, and split quite nicely across the race. Was that always the intended strategy, or did you have to make some tweaks over the course of the race distance?
I think the problem there wasn't a strategy, Paul. That's half the issue. I came into it, I didn't even think about the two-stop strategy. My head's not been in the game at all, and I didn't even consider that a two-stop was on the cards, whereas a lot of the other boys up there did, and fair play to them for doing so. I messed it up to the point where I'd missed the memo that we had to pit for tyres, which sounds silly, but I have done quad stints at Daytona before, and I thought that's on. So halfway through the race, I was watching the Pauls, I was watching Stephan, just trying to work out their times in my head to see if they'd taken tyres. And by the time I realised that I had to take tyres, Stephan was taking 3 seconds a lap out of me. He pitted sort of out of sync, pretty much just on the hour mark, I think just after. I knew at that, I saw it, and I saw our gap, because I was holding about a 13 to 15 second gap to him, which I was really quite happy with, considering he is the faster driver. And then when he got those tyres a bit later, he just started taking chunks out of me. And I think, as you'd have seen, but at the point he passed me, I just pulled straight into the pits and just went, right, you need some fresh rubber on now, and just secure, fourth, essentially.
Indeed, we did catch that moment where you ducked into the pits as Stephan started coming past you on the run through the bank into the start-finish line. But still, as you say, a good run to fourth place in the end, and some great points on the board. And really, as a moment of reflection, you're opening 4 rounds in this series. How would you say your championship campaign has gone so far, given you have been, I'd like to label you as Mr. Consistent in the LMP2 class, because you've been up there right at the top at one point, and really, you've been the one who's always been guaranteed to bring the points home round after round.
I appreciate it, and to that end, I'm actually really pleased, because I think where was it? I think it was I had a terrible result. Was it Motab? I can't remember where it was. I think it was the feature at Motab. I didn't enjoy it at all, but I didn't go in prepared. Frankly, this season I jumped in really last minute. I'd have normally been in the GTs, but I've done lots of LMP2 stuff before, and it was an opportunity to jump straight in. So I was like, yep, no worries, jump into that. So in terms of prep, I've not done any. I've not been in any of the practice sessions. So to turn up and be able to do it consistently without making any massive mistakes is, for me, a real bonus, because, even at Daytona, I'm not the most consistent through bus stop. I know that's a big time loss there. It's such a fast track. If you mess up one of the slow corners and don't get the run around the outside, you're losing. You're giving away time. So yeah, to be able to just turn up and do some consistent, just bring home points it's nice. And it's nice to see my name up there a little bit. I'd like to be on the pace of Stephan and Paul, the Pauls. But hopefully that will come. I think I took a bit of comfort that I finished on the top lap with them. I know they had penalties, but to finish up there and to finish a lap ahead of the guy behind me was encouraging for me.
Oh, most definitely. And taking that forward into the next third of the championship, of course, rounds 5 through to 8 beckon, starting in 2 weeks' time. How are you feeling for the commencement of the Series Tour of Europe with the Red Bull Ring?
Yeah, good. I like Red Bull Ring. It's a fun track. I've driven it a fair bit in GTs and LMP. I think it's going to be an interesting one. It is quite a short circuit, so with the best part of 30 cars on the track, it's going to get busy. I think it's nice. I think a lot of people have now bedded into the whole multi-class thing. I think there's still a little bit of animosity between some of the GT drivers, which is a shame. I think it's, they'll always say it's the LMP2 driver having a whinge, but I think it's, if we lose half a second between each of them, there's 20 cars there. That's 10 seconds across the whole field. And if we're lapping them, like we did at Daytona 7 or 8 times, that's 70 to 80 seconds a race. That's a lap. So, that's the difference in this race essentially between me and first place. So it is important that we're making the overtakes, even if at the time it doesn't appear like it's for position because we're by ourselves. And I know, having watched the race back, a lot of the GT drivers are being very, very feisty with each other, as you should be. We all should be. So I think once people just settle in, accept everyone else on the track with each other, it's going to be fun. But looking forward to Red Bull Ring, and I'm not sure where we're off to after that. But I need to put in a bit more practice, I think, on the sim and try and get the times up as well as the consistency. And then, hopefully really be fighting for some silverware.
Well, we can definitely expect great things from you, I think, as we go deeper into the season. But until then, thank you for joining us in the interview room once again, Sam. And, well, congratulations on what's been a brilliant drive to P4 today at Daytona.
Thank you, Paul. And I must say again, the commentary has been fantastic to listen to and enjoy. So, keep it up. It's really, really good to listen to.
No problem. It's my pleasure.
And we'll see you next round. Cheers, mate.
All right. Have a lovely evening.
You too, mate.
So hearing that from Sam Holman, and as I said to him, I do like to label him as Mr. Consistent, because if you look back at his scores over the opening 4 rounds, the one thing that Holman has over the rest of his peers currently is that continued earning of points round after round. And at one point, to be fair, going into round number 3, if I remember correctly, he was our championship leader, only by a small margin. But that's the thing that counts in today. This is a marathon in terms of championship, not a sprint. It's 12 rounds with a dropped round. And that is the thing. I think if Holman can continue to build a little bit more pace into his race and get a little bit more, well, I don't think he needs too much more consistency, because we showed that tonight how consistent he was, but if he can build in a tiny bit more consistency into his racing as well, I think as we go deeper into the season, his results are really going to start to show through. And I think there could be a good number of podiums on the cards for Holman, perhaps even some wins in the features with that reverse grid in play, depending on how the championship plays out, or he may even be able to go for it from the outset in the sprint. A lot to see with Sam Holman, but now we must come to our third driver for interview today, and that is Stephan Wessels. Let's bring the South African driver into the interview room and hear his thoughts on what was quite a topsy-turvy race, it has to be said. So as we briefly wait for him to be ready to come into the interview room, we're just grabbing Stephan's time very shortly. I think he is ready for us, so let's bring Stephan in. Stephan, a race of 2 halves today in the end in the fight for P3. A difficult start, but once everything had seemed to calm down, you seem to be really finding that momentum. How do you feel your experience at Daytona went? Give us a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen. I think we may have some slight technical issues here. We're just trying to see. Stephan, if you're there, can you hear me? You might have some trouble with your microphone. Apologies, ladies and gentlemen. We'll try and resolve these issues as soon as we can. But we do seem to be experiencing some slight technical difficulties at this point in time, but we will get those resolved as soon as we have the feasible option too. Give us a brief moment, ladies and gentlemen. We will be right back. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to say we've resolved the technical issues and Stephan is now with us. Stephan, a bit of a topsy-turvy race tonight, a difficult start which saw you in a number of incidents, but in the end you settled down into a rhythm and really charged for P3. How do you feel your Daytona experience was?
my Daytona was pretty much went like the first quarter of this season so far, I would say. Not according to plan. Definitely not as smooth as I would like it to be. But I mean, at the end, I managed to salvage a third place, which I would have taken after half an hour into the race. So yeah, it ended all right, but it was difficult in the beginning.
Indeed, and just taking us through that beginning, there are a number of moments where you seem to really be building that pace only for an incident to occur that really stinted that pace and really held it back. Just take us through, from your perspective, what happened there.
So at the beginning, obviously with Paul missing 2 rounds, he was last in the points, which meant he had reverse grid pole. So I mean, even on a good day, I'm only matching him for pace. I won't be running away with it. So, which means that in the best case scenario, whatever gap he pulls out, I won't be able to catch up. Obviously, things can happen. You can get penalties. There's a lot that can happen in a race. And I must say, between Paul Walton and Paul Scott, I mean, they did a brilliant first stint. They got away at the beginning of the race, and yeah, I just had to try and get past the guys, but it was okay until we got to the GT3 traffic. Then it gets very, very tricky.
Indeed, and as you're saying there, with the fact that you had to come from the back of the LMP2 field and then eventually come onto the GT3 traffic, and that's where a number of the incidents started to occur. Obviously, not going into too much detail with regards to each incident, that's for the stewards to take a look at and to be discussed offline. But it did seem as though in a couple of cases you were trying to come through, the traffic just wasn't quite ready for you coming through. Alternatively, it just didn't seem to work out at the right time.
Yeah, look, there was in the beginning of the race, obviously the more time you lose in stint 1 in the traffic. I know it's a long race, but I mean, if you give up, if I give up 30 seconds to the leaders in the class, that's the race done. You're not going to get 30 seconds back on guys that run the same pace. So you kind of need to try and you need to be, it's weird, but you need to be aggressive, but you can't be your calculated risk. That's the word I'm looking for. So, and I mean, to be honest, I'm not happy in my own performance in terms of some of the moves. In other places, I feel I'm too cautious, and then you go like half a lap before you overtake someone. So yeah, it's a bit tricky because you have the pace on a GT3, you go into the braking zone, and to try and not impede them, you try and maybe perhaps brake a bit later to clear them. You know, you don't want to go side by side through the corner, you want to clear them properly, and in doing that, you might make a mistake. So yeah, there's lots to learn out of this first 4 races.
Oh, indeed, a lot to learn. But in the end, bringing home what was a solid P3 after you cleared the traffic and really chasing after that third place because of the fact that the leaders have broken so far away. But taking a step back, earlier on you were saying about the fact that really today's race was a reflection of the first 4 races of the season, the first third of the season. On reflection, do you feel as though it's been a 4 races of there could have been more points obtained and you've had to sort of roll with it and take the best of sometimes bad results?
Yeah, definitely. Look, at the end of last season, obviously I was racing GT3s then, but the second half of last season was really good. I had some nice pace. I was very consistent in my racing. And I mean, if something did happen, 9 out of 10 times it wasn't due to my own mistake. So, and this season I've been making mistakes, which I don't like doing. Obviously, no one likes making mistakes, but that's something I pride myself on. And also, this is the first time I'm driving the LMP2, and I really enjoy driving it. And when I'm doing the practice sessions, the pace is there. But in the race with the GT3s, I seem to just lose my rhythm and struggle a bit with that. So that's something that I really want to work on going forward. I will need to work on going forward because I will need to. Paul's going to catch up to me if I continue the way I do. But I mean, in Hull's first race of the season, I won. The second race, the feature race at Watkins Glen, my PC crashed. So that was a lot of points dropped. Road Atlanta, I would rather forget. Motorsport Park was good again. So it's, yeah, this, like I said, this race is pretty much how it's been.
Oh, indeed. And whilst you're marked as the favourite in the championship at this point in time, you really have, minus Paul Walton's pace when he's been available, you have been the driver for everybody to catch. Heading into what is rounds 5 to 8, our second third of the season, and the commencement of the Series Tour of Europe, how are you feeling for the Red Bull Ring in 2 weeks' time?
Red Bull Ring is an awesome track. It's a really a track that you can race nicely there. There's long straights, so I think in terms of Red Bull Ring, other than I would say the little infield section, there you're gonna struggle to get past the GT3s, but then there's a straight, so you're gonna have like 2 corners where you have to wait, and you're gonna have a straight again. The last 2 corners you won't be able to overtake the GT3s over there, but the rest of the lap is gonna be, not gonna be impeded that much. It's 1 corner long straight, 1 corner long straight, that type of thing. So I think that's going to be quite good in terms of the racing. And in between car classes, it's going to be very good racing as well. Obviously, the slipstream is a big role to play there. And yeah, now I'm looking forward to it. But off tracks is going to be an interesting factor there as well.
Or indeed, the track limits at Red Bull Ring can be quite nasty at certain places, and at other points they can be exploitable. But with that in mind, we do look forward to seeing how you get on when we head to the Red Bull Ring in 2 weeks' time. But until then, congratulations on your third place finish today, Stephan. Of course, you're our championship leader going into the second third of the season, so we look forward to seeing how your campaign continues. And once again, thank you for joining us in the interview room as always.
Cool. Cheers, Paul.
Have a lovely evening.
You too. Bye.
So hearing there from Stephan Wessels, and interesting that he uses today's race at Daytona as a summary or a synonym, if you will, for his overall season so far in terms of drop points, things not necessarily working out as planned. I think Wessels also can be a little bit times, and to be fair, I think we can all be this way. He's quite hard on himself, perhaps a little bit too hard on himself, having only really started on iRacing last season in the GT3 Championship Season 2 in GT3s, having transitioned from a Assetto Corsa Competizione, and really dominated the GT3 AM class there in Lobby 2, and now going to LMP 2 class machines, and he's picking up the class very rapidly indeed. It has to be said, the rate at which Wessels is flying is absolutely incredible, and the fact that really he is the favourite, and if you put Paul Walton out of the picture, you would argue is the favourite by a considerable margin, but Walton of course adds a new dimension to it. But with that in mind, I think if Wessels can really get a consistent set of results together in terms of going from from round 5 to round 6, it's that continued run of points. And if he's not winning, he's second place. I think there's no reason why Wessels cannot remain the favourite in the LMP2 AM class, because he's got all the ingredients there and he is absolutely on the charge right now. It'll be interesting to see how he continues that momentum at the Red Bull Ring in 2 weeks' time. But now we must come to our final interview for tonight, and that is with Richard Stanton, again another one of our LMP2 AM drivers. And as we just wait to bring him into the interview room, I think we might be having some more technical issues here, ladies and gentlemen. Give us a brief moment. We will be bringing him in very shortly. And as we bring Richard Stanton into the interview room, Richard, P5 today at Daytona. Looked as though it was quite a difficult race for yourself, but in the end you managed to recover to finish in the top 5. How do you feel your Daytona experience went?
Yeah, good evening, Paul. Overall, pretty happy with how it went, if I'm being totally honest. I was a little bit unlucky. I got hit on the outlap on the rolling start from behind, which caused a little bit of rear end damage for me. But that being said, I got off to a pretty good start. First few laps, managed to hold my starting position. But as the race went on, I made a few silly mistakes, but managed to keep pushing and get myself back up to P5, which I think when you look at the front 4 and how much quicker they were, P5 is probably the best I could have hoped for out of the race. So overall, I'm really pleased with it.
Oh, indeed. And we saw that from the start of the race. Great pace being shown from yourself. And to be fair, that comparison, I think, with the top four there is a valid one. But still, that pace shining through. And it did look as though at a good number of points you were on course for a potential P4. But there just seems to be a couple of small incidents, as well as the damage you picked up at the start, that just held you back.
Yeah, definitely. There were, and they were only really minor incidents. Silly spins coming onto the outfield, really difficult. I found with the car setup. I certainly found there were other car setups I tried around Daytona that were, far more akin to my driving style. But the setup that we had to use is the one we used, and I just found it a little bit difficult. I did later on in the race just have the one incident, come in alongside a GT3 car, and had to make a late decision on what to do. In doing so, hit the tyre wall, and thankfully had my brother Matt as the crew chief, made the call to pit early for that third stop, and then finish the race on full fuel. So pitting out of sync against the other two drivers, Collins and Price, that I was probably racing for P5 for position. And the absolute right call, left me very little fuel at the end of the race, but stopped me having to do the splash and dash, which was the original strategy we were going to do.
Oh, most definitely. A smart strategic call then. We saw how in the end you managed to jump away from the battle for P5 and really just cement it for yourself. And it was more the case that in the end it was Price versus Collins battling for P6. So on the strategy, definitely the right call. But I do have to ask, obviously, with Daytona being such a relentless track and over the course of 2 hours, how have you found it transitioning from what is that sprint into feature format to just the single 2 hours? Has it been a major challenge, or has it been one that you've welcomed with open arms? Because I know some drivers prefer longer races rather than short ones.
Yeah, I mean, so for me personally, managing the car is probably not the hard part. Managing my bladder tends to be a little bit harder for me. So there was a little bit of nerves for me whether or not it was going to last the full 2 hours. But I managed to prevent myself from drinking for at least a couple of hours before the race. And I think once you get into it, once you get your head down and you're racing, it all goes pretty well. So I think the real benefit of racing for 2 hours is that you get into a bit of a rhythm. You get into a flow around the track, and because we had a strategy, albeit we had to deviate from it, I felt pretty confident throughout that we knew what we were doing. We were slightly hampered this week. Been practicing most of the week with brother Jim, who's also in the league as well. Unfortunately, he couldn't make the race, positively due to the birth of his daughter, Sophia Rose. So a little bit off-putting, not having him there on the track as well, and on Discord to chat to throughout. But overall, I was really pleased with it. 2 hours is a long time, and I managed the car fairly well throughout.
Well, firstly, may I say congratulations live on air to Jim and the birth of his daughter, Sophia Rose, and I hope baby and family are all doing okay.
Yeah, all doing absolutely fantastic. Yeah, she was. She came along just a day before the race, so I think it was going to be a tough one for him to get a pass for that one. But we'll see him back for Red Bull Ring, and I've no doubt. He's got good pace. He showed that at the race, the week before. So I think having him back there as well will be really interesting for those top 3 spots.
Oh, brilliant, and glad to hear baby and family are all doing well. And just coming back to yourself there, of course, with the performance today and carrying that momentum for, obviously, shame about the absence of Jim, but he'll be coming back at the Red Bull Ring, which is great to hear. This result today does place you quite firmly just outside of, if we do the math correctly here, just outside of the top 5 and very close to Jim with regards to points. I think you'll just be ahead of him in P6. You may even be in P5 just ahead of Jack Wyborn, depending on how the points play out. But with that on reflection, you've been really battling in the midfield of the LMP2 class. How do you feel your opening 4 rounds of this season have gone?
So again, overall, I'm really happy with how they've gone. I think I missed the first week due to work commitments, which was a real shame. And I think had I have not missed it, I'd like to think I'd be a little bit further up the league and up the points. But this is my first year in the league. It's my first year league racing, so I haven't set myself any real expectations for what I'll achieve from it. I think it's, as I've said before in previous interviews, it's a really competitive league. You can see Paul Walton, even with a stop and go penalty, 50 seconds in front. It's clear there's a different class of driver up in front of me, but that's not going to stop me chasing them down and doing my best to get as far up there as I possibly can. And certainly really enjoy driving in the LMP. It's a real challenge navigating traffic, but I think there's a lot of the season left to go. I'm looking forward to seeing what I can do at some of the tracks I'm a lot more familiar with, Daytona and Canadian Tire, Watkin Glen. I haven't driven all that much before. In fact, I've only really driven them the week leading up to the race. So as we get to Red Bull Ring and some of the other tracks, I'm a lot more familiar with them. And I think, bringing that knowledge and experience of the track will hopefully see me finish in good position.
Well, indeed. Well, we do hope to see that come to fruition, starting with Red Bull Ring in 2 weeks' time. We look forward to seeing you taking the LMP2 machine to the asphalt there. But until then, congratulations once again on the P5 finish today. Thank you for joining us in the interview, Richard. And, well, we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time.
No, thanks, Paul, and massive shout out to yourself for fantastic commentary, and to Mark and the team for putting on what is a absolutely fantastic, well-organised league. It's a pleasure to be a part of it.
Well, we all at NextGen Racing really do appreciate that feedback, Richard. And, well, at the end of the day, if you're happy, we're happy. So definitely keep on enjoying the league, and we love to see you out on track.
All the best, Paul. Take care.
You too. So hearing there from Richard Stanton, and of course a bit of a mixed feeling race at Daytona because of the absence of his brother, and they really do like that brotherly love up between Richard and Jim in terms of both wanting to be out on the circuit together, racing of course as individual drivers but as part of their privateer outfit, and at the same time that absence being felt. They've still got Matt there, I believe their third brother in what is the pit crew there, telling them about strategy and whatnot. But today, Richard by his lonesome putting in a brilliant P5 performance. But at the same time, I think he feels that with that absence, of course, in the season opener due to those work commitments, he could be higher up the table. And I think, again, he's emphasised time and time again, it is true how close it is in the midfield of the LMP2 AM class. It varies from week to week. And I do think that Stanton, much like Holman in a way, is one of those drivers who is coming through and is really one of the unsung heroes of the LMP2 class for the simple reason, putting in the results week on week, albeit Stanton does need to just get a little bit more consistency on the board versus Holman. I think there could be a good rivalry between the two of them. But today, Stanton had to beat both Michael Price and also what was Jonathan Collins, and he did so by simply using strategy to his advantage and taking that third stop earlier than most, and it worked out a treat. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our post-round interviews for Round 4 at Daytona in the IMB Raceway lobby. And it is now time for us to wrap up by saying thank you, firstly, very much for watching. And then if you do want to know more about the Next Gen Racing community, why not check us out, our official website, that's nextgenracing.co.uk. Or if you are Facebook inclined, you can take a look at our official Facebook group, that is facebook.com/groups/Next Gen Racing. Also, a huge thank you to our partners without whom we'd not be able to bring you a lobby to. That is, of course, our title sponsor for our lobby, IMB Raceway. Their website is www.imbraceway.com. And now we must look ahead to next time, where we take a week's break. There is no racing next week, but we will be back for the racing come the week commencing what is the 9th of May. Specifically, the races will occur on Wednesday, the 11th of May, but we'll be bringing you all the racing action once again from the IMB Raceway lobby as they head to the Red Bull Ring, that's Austria, Spielberg, on Friday the 13th of May. An unlucky day for some, Friday the 13th, but who will be able to make it work for them? We will have to wait and see in 2 weeks' time. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, we have been Next Gen Racing. I have been your host and commentator, Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight. I hope you will have a lovely weekend, but remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.